I stood before the mountain gate of the Heavenly Sword Immortal sect, staring at the massive line stretching down the path. News had spread fast, and cultivators from all over had gathered to try their luck. Most of them weren't even human. I saw bizarre outfits and strange racial features that made my head spin. Honestly, looking at them, I felt a sudden urge to just rob them of their essence blood right then and there. Fellow Taoist, are you also here for the selection to serve Lord Qi Long? A scrawny young man asked, approaching me. I looked at him. He was talking to me, but his lecherous eyes were glued to my 2 fire flood dragon clones standing behind me. Every few seconds, a long, forked tongue flicked out of his mouth. A snake cultivator. Disgust rose in my chest. Get lost, I spat. The man froze, his face twisting in anger. What did you say? You dare tell a member of the Fey tribe to get lost? Just as he raised his voice, a disciple from the Heavenly Sword sect flew over, looking excited. Which one of you is from the Fey tribe? He shouted, looking around. Lord, that would be me, the scrawny youth said proudly. He gave me a disdainful glare before the disciple led him away toward the inner sect. A few moments later, 100-foot-long patterned python was tossed out of the gates. It crashed onto the dirt, its body completely shriveled up as if every drop of blood had been sucked dry. It was dead as a doornail. I sensed its aura. It was that same arrogant guy from the Fey tribe. Suddenly, a figure flew out from the sect, surrounded by brilliant light. A powerful pressure washed over the crowd. A mid-stage true immortal. I felt a slight chill in my heart. Listen up, all you who came for the selection, the Taoist shouted from the sky. We are only recruiting tribes with true dragon bloodlines or other powerful bloodlines of equal rank. If anyone else dares to lie about their ancestry, that snake is your example. His voice rolled like thunder, and his pressure intensified. The cultivators who had come just to try their luck turned pale. It was one thing to try, but it was another to die for trying. People started whispering, weighing their lives against the opportunity. Soon, a large chunk of the crowd turned tail and ran. Only about 20 of us remained. The disciple who had taken the snake man away came back out. He looked at the 20 of us and smiled playfully. Are you all sure your bloodlines are strong enough? That single question made a few more people waver. If your bloodline wasn't up to par, you really would die. 7 or 8 more people bolted. I see you all have some confidence, the disciple said, gesturing for us to follow. Come with me. I stepped forward, my 2 sisters, my clones, following closely behind. The moment we crossed the mountain gate, the world shifted. A vast, majestic sect appeared before my eyes. There were countless immortal mountains and palaces, surrounded by auspicious clouds and flowing purple mist. It was an endless, divine landscape. My eyes snagged on one particular mountain. It was covered in immortal swords, their radiant light so bright it made my head swim. I was stunned. Every single sword I sensed on that mountain was no weaker than my own golden feather sword, and there were at least tens of thousands of them. My heart burned with greed. I wanted to rush up there, grab them all, and give one to every one of my clones. I clenched my fists and then slowly forced myself to relax. Fine, I thought. Asterisk, my swords can stay here for now. When I'm stronger, I'll come back for them. Asterisk. While I was plotting a future heist, the other 10 people were shaking with excitement, acting like they had already joined the sect. The disciple led us to a grand palace on one of the peaks. Senior sister, another batch is here, he called out. Let them try and see if Xiaobai is satisfied. A voice like tinkling wind chimes answered from within. We entered the hall and saw a young girl in a lavish immortal dress. She looked about 17 or 18, small and delicate, with eyes as bright as stars. She was cradling a fluffy white ball in her arms. I didn't think much of her at first, but then my system pinged her cultivation level. I nearly choked. An early-stage true immortal. And my gut told me she actually was that young. She wasn't just some old hag using a youth-preserving technique. The world really wasn't fair. Luckily, I wasn't normal either. If she was a freak of nature, I was a bigger one. The white ball in her arms, Xiaobai, lazily lifted its head and stared at us. Instantly, I felt a heavy pressure. It wasn't the spiritual pressure of a true immortal, it was a bloodline suppression. My current fire flood dragon body felt a sudden, instinctive urge to kneel. According to the system, this little thing was a newborn Qi-Long divine beast, already at the 5th level of the Void Immortal Realm. My heart raced with excitement. This was it. I had to get its essence blood. You, come try, the girl said, pointing at a random cultivator. The man scrambled forward. Lady Immortal, what should I do? Before he could finish, Xiaobai opened its tiny dragon mouth and took a sharp breath. The man's face turned bright red as a massive orb of essence blood was ripped from his body. The blood condensed in the air, shrinking into a tiny, concentrated drop. Xiaobai didn't look happy. It increased the suction. The man screamed, his body shifting back into his true form, a dragon turtle. But even then, his blood kept pouring out. He was dying. Mercy, I quit, the turtle wailed. The girl placed a finger over Xiaobai's mouth, cutting off the suction. The dragon turtle collapsed, barely clinging to life. Xiaobai swallowed the tiny drop of blood, looking unsatisfied. Your bloodline is too weak to serve Xiaobai, the girl said dismissively. Leave. She looked at the rest of us. Who's next? After seeing that display, everyone hesitated. The fear in the room was palpable. I'll go, I said, stepping forward. The girl looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She noticed my 2 sisters stepping up with me. Are you 3 siblings? Flood dragon bloodline. We are, I replied. A spark of joy lit up her eyes. 3 flood dragons from the same source were hard to find in this region. In her arms, Xiaobai started drooling, its eyes locked onto us. The girl let go of the beast's mouth, and the little guy immediately let out a hungry roar. I felt a terrifying force trying to churn my blood and rip it out. My body instinctively fought back. My 2 clones did the same. Because our bloodlines were high level, Xiaobai couldn't just snatch our blood instantly like it did with the others. The little beast got frustrated. Its drool flowed faster, and it let out another, even more powerful roar. Seeing this, the girl's eyes filled with intense anticipation. The girl looked at us, her voice cold but firm. Don't resist too much, she commanded. The sect will compensate you later so you can recover quickly. I looked at Xiaobai, the tiny beast in her arms. I didn't know why this creature needed to suck the essence and blood of dragons, but I had a plan. I communicated with my 2 clones, Huiyuan and Huoling. I decided to let the beast drain the essence from my clones first. I'd find a way to take it all back later. We shared a look and simultaneously stopped resisting. 3 bursts of crimson essence and blood shot out from our bodies. Xiaobai's eyes lit up with pure joy. He opened his mouth and gulped the blood down in one go, letting out a satisfied sigh. Then, something unexpected happened. The girl, whose name I learned was Mo Lin, stood there stunned. Xiaobai, what are you doing? Come back here, she yelled. But the little dragon ignored her. He rubbed his tiny head against Huiyuan's chest, squinting his eyes in total bliss. He looked like he was either drifting off to sleep or just enjoying the warmth. He completely ignored his master. Mo Lin looked at Huiyuan's curvy figure, then looked down at her own flat chest. Her face turned red with anger, and she clenched her fists. You little pervert dragon, she hissed. She turned her gaze back to the 3 of us. What are your names? Huofeng, Huiyuan, and Huoling, I replied. She nodded, trying to regain her composure. Fine, you 3 passed. I'll have someone process your entry into the sect shortly. We bowed and thanked her, our faces showing just the right amount of surprise and joy. Mo Lin glanced at Xiaobai, who was still snuggled against Huiyuan, and huffed. Since Xiaobai likes Sister Huiyuan so much, she can stay here in my immortal palace for now. 3 days passed in a flash. Back in Silver Moon City, I was lying out in the sun, but I wasn't happy. I had sent 3 clones to steal the dragon's bloodline, but I had failed miserably. Not only did I fail to steal anything, but I had also lost a significant amount of essence and blood from my fire dragon clones. Huiyuan had stayed close to Mo Lin these past few days and managed to uncover some secrets. It turned out that Xiaobai, the dragon godling, was born with a defect. Even though he was born at the false immortal realm, he couldn't even transform into a human shape. He needed the bloodline essence of other divine beasts to make up for his natural deficiencies. My 3 clones were now inner disciples of the Heaven Sword sect in name, but in reality, they were just blood ATMs for Xiaobai. Mo Lin kept such a close eye on them that my clones had zero chance to strike. It was frustrating, but I knew even the tightest security had gaps. I ordered my clones to stay undercover and wait for the right moment. I hadn't come this far to leave empty-handed. The sacrifice wasn't a total loss, though. As nurses for Xiao Bai and inner disciples who gave up their blood, the sect gave us plenty of compensation. We received healing pills, but the most useful thing was sect contribution points. Every time my clones gave blood, they earned points that could be traded for immortal crystals, techniques, or pills. Using 3 days' worth of points, Huafeng managed to trade for the first part of a high-grade technique called the Gung Gold Sword Way. It was perfect for my gold spiritual root. This gave me a new idea. I had so many clones. Using them just for mining and cultivation was a waste. High-level techniques that could lead to the golden immortal realm were guarded like treasures. You couldn't just buy them with money. You had to join a sect. My current technique, the immortal opening art, was just a basic one for building a foundation. I needed more clones and more sects. Thinking about sects made me think of my other clone, the one who ran away with Ao Liwei. I felt a bit speechless. That woman actually treated my clone like a personal bodyguard. He was in the Yunfan sect, but only as her family servant, not a disciple. His movements were restricted, and the male disciples were already gossiping, saying he was her secret lover. Still, Ao Liwei treated him well and gave him plenty of resources. Of course, all those resources ended up in my pocket anyway. I decided to step things up. I summoned a blood fiend clone and gave him a cloud-soaring token I had found earlier. I sent him toward the Yunfan sect. I couldn't just keep working behind closed doors. I needed to pluck resources from every major sect. To stay safe, I never let my clones enter or leave directly from my hidden mansion. I checked my internal progress. In 3 days, my cultivation had surged again. I had opened 3 more immortal apertures, bringing my total to 5. At this rate, I'd hit the 4th level of the false immortal realm in 7 days. Soon after my blood fiend clone left, I used my Black Diamond VIP card to call Su Qian over. He arrived at my house in minutes, carrying gifts and acting incredibly humble. I need to exchange some crystals, I said coldly. Since I had reached the 3rd level, my clone's mining efficiency had doubled. 2,000 clones mining for 4 days had brought in 16 million mid-grade crystals. That was worth 160 million low-grade immortal crystals. When Su Qian saw the mountain of wealth, his jaw hit the floor. He started shaking. Sir, I can't handle this much. The amount was so massive it was beyond his authority. He quickly called in Mo Qingzhu, a 3rd-level building master from the Wanbao Immortal Association. The transaction went smoothly, and Su Qian looked like he was floating on air from the commission he'd get. As for me, I just sat there for a while, admiring the sheer scale of the fortune I was building. Buying a clone cost me 20,000 low-grade immortal crystals. To me, that was pocket change. I didn't even blink as I gave the system the order to exchange. Ding. Based on your current balance, you can exchange for 6,000 clones. Cost: 120 million low-grade immortal crystals. Processing. As the system's voice echoed, the misty internal space flooded with 6,000 figures clad in deep black. They stood in a massive, dense military formation, a silent army waiting for my command. With this addition, my total number of clones reached a staggering 10,000. 10,000. I muttered, standing up in the valley. A wave of pure excitement washed over me. I felt like I was floating, my mind and body lighter than air. It took a long time for my breathing to slow down and for the adrenaline to fade. Then, a thought struck me. I still had plenty of crystals left. System, why hasn't the 5th stage of the clone function unlocked yet? Ding. The 5th stage is extremely powerful. The host must reach the true immortal realm to unlock it. I narrowed my eyes, a golden light flickering in them. A true immortal? Fine. It wouldn't take long. With 10,000 clones at my disposal, I had all the manpower I needed to dominate this stage of my journey. I immediately began delegating tasks. 5,000 clones were assigned to cultivation. Another 5,000 were sent back to the mines. As for the few clones on special missions, they were a drop in the bucket compared to this new army. The shift was instant. With 5,000 clones working for me, my cultivation speed hit a new peak, 2,500 times the normal rate. I was opening nearly 2.5 immortal apertures every single day. 3 days passed in a flash. I felt the 12 immortal apertures inside my body humming with power. A confident smile played on my lips. False immortal level 4, break for me. In the system space, 5,000 clones exerted their strength simultaneously. But then I frowned. The breakthrough didn't happen instantly. Usually, these transitions were smooth as silk, but this time, I hit a wall. Even with a 2,500 times speed boost, there was resistance. I didn't panic. I closed my eyes and focused. I realized that the 36 apertures I had opened were forming a swirling vortex of starlight. They were aggressively linking up with my lower dantian, trying to transform it into a vast, cosmic domain. What is this? I wondered. According to the manuals, the false immortal realm is only about opening apertures. You aren't supposed to form a grotto heaven until you reach the true immortal realm and grasp the laws of the world. Was I forming a grotto heaven early? Perhaps 5,000 clones pushing at once was just too much raw power. I was forcing a shortcut I didn't even know existed. I decided to lean into it. Another day passed. Suddenly, golden light erupted from my body. My lower dantian became a brilliant, shimmering ocean, echoing with the sound of mountain-crushing waves and thunder. Keep going, I commanded. Half a day later, a massive boom shook my soul. The golden light retracted, and my dantian solidified into a miniature world, a grotto heaven. My strength skyrocketed as I officially stepped into the 4th level of the false immortal realm. I was confused, honestly. I was a self-taught cultivator, a wild path practitioner with no master to guide me. If I had a true immortal or a golden immortal mentor, they could probably explain this anomaly. But I was on my own. The good news was that I felt incredible. My power had tripled, and my indestructible golden body's defense had reached a whole new level. My dantian was now a misty, developing world waiting for me to explore. I tested a simple spell, and the difference was night and day. The energy was more concentrated, more lethal. I'm strong, I whispered, clenching my fist. I wonder how I compare to the geniuses of the immortal realm now. However, as I continued testing, I noticed a downside. My cultivation speed had suddenly dropped by half. Was this a normal hurdle for the mid-stage false immortal realm, or was it because of this premature grotto heaven? I realized then just how much I needed a teacher. A message suddenly pulsed in my mind. Master, I have arrived at the Yunfan sect. Several true immortals are fighting to take me as their disciple. Whose door should I enter? It was my bloodfiend clone. I immediately linked our consciousness to see what was happening. Earlier that morning, the clone had arrived at the sect with the cloud-soaring token. At first, the receiving deacon looked down on him. But once the tests for cultivation, race, and talent were completed, the deacon's face changed. He sprinted into the inner depths of the sect. Within minutes, a true immortal arrived. Then a second, then a third and a fourth. A false immortal with a grotto heaven, and from the bloodfiend tribe. A gray-robed Taoist stared at my clone, his eyes burning with greed and excitement. Good disciple, join my peak, and I will teach you the ultimate arts. Have you no shame? Another shouted. He's clearly meant for me. I watched through the clone's eyes as 4 true immortals started screaming at each other. The argument lasted for 15 minutes, spit flying everywhere. Finally, a purple-robed Taoist cleared his throat. Why don't we let the disciple choose? Shut up. He's not your disciple yet. The deacon who had brought me in tried to play peacemaker. Seniors, please stop. If you keep shouting, more people will come, and it will only get harder to decide. The 4 true immortals went silent and turned to look at my clone simultaneously. Disciple, who do you choose? I looked at the 4 of them. How about this? You 4 have a fight. Whoever wins, I'll call master. The 4 experts froze. They stared at my clone, stunned by the sheer audacity of the request. Bold brat, the gray-robed Taoist laughed, his temper flaring. Fine, let's settle this high in the sky. The 4 of them vanished, reappearing thousands of feet up. The sky exploded. Immortal lights clashed, turning the clouds into a chaotic ocean of energy. The commotion drew the attention of the entire Yunfan sect. A massive voice eventually boomed from the peaks. telling everyone to calm down because it was just the elders sparring. I waited patiently. Dozens of powerful divine senses swept over my clone. I couldn't feel them myself, but the system pinged me every time it happened. Luckily, no one noticed anything wrong with my identity. An hour later, the gray-robed Taoist descended from the clouds, laughing like a maniac. Ha ha, I told you, kid. You're mine. Before I could say a word, a massive hand grabbed me, and I was whisked away to a magnificent immortal mountain. Inside a grand hall, my clone bowed. Disciple Shui Yun greets the master. Good. Very good. The Taoist beamed with pride. You made the right choice. I have mastered the laws of light. You're going to be legendary. I stared at my new master, Fu Guang, as he beamed with pride. I didn't have the heart to tell him I wasn't actually guessing when I praised his power. Master is mighty, I said simply, giving him the validation he craved. Fu Guang laughed, clearly pleased with himself. He started asking about my past, and when I told him I had always been a loose cultivator, his expression shifted to pure shock. In the Yunfan sect, even with all their resources, becoming a cave heaven void immortal was rare. Each one was considered a top-tier genius of their generation. However, his suspicion didn't last long. Every new disciple had to pass the test of the mortal sky mirror. If I were a spy or a threat, the mirror would have screamed. Since it stayed silent, he assumed I was just a clean, exceptionally talented kid. He couldn't imagine a mere fourth-level void immortal having the means to bypass such a treasure. Master, I asked, playing the part of the curious student, what exactly is a cave heaven void immortal? Fu Guang looked at me and smiled. It means you've managed to transform your immortal apertures into a personal cave heaven realm while still in the void immortal stage. Most people have to wait until they become true immortals to even start that process. Your foundation is deeper, your cultivation speed will be faster, and your starting point is already higher than a regular true immortal. He stroked his beard, his voice full of pride. There are 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3 cave heavens. The more you condense now, the stronger your future will be. I myself was a 1 cave heaven genius. He didn't mention that he only achieved his single cave heaven at the 9th level of the void immortal stage. Comparing himself to me, someone who did it at level 4, wasn't even fair. That was why they had fought over me. I had the potential to hit the 2nd or even 3rd level. Back in Music City, my main body felt the connection stabilize. I decided to pull my consciousness back for a while. To be safe, I wiped the clone's memory of my true identity. I left it with my personality and basic instincts, but it no longer knew it was a puppet. I knew my cultivation speed was too fast. Eventually, the sect would get suspicious. My plan for the clone, whom I named Shui Yun, was simple: gather information, hoard resources, and steal every immortal technique possible. If the clone got caught and killed, so be it. They would never link a blood spirit tribesman to a human girl like me. Meanwhile, in another grand hall within the Yunfan sect, a young man named Xiao Wuji sat with a cold expression. Senior brother, Lady Li Wei is going too far, his lackey, Zhao Yan, reported. She kicked out our messengers and what? Speak, Xiao Wuji snapped. People have seen her and that new attendant of hers being intimate. They're inseparable. Word is spreading through the sect that they've already slept together. That's why she's ignoring you. Xiao Wuji's face went pale with rage. The jade fan in his hand shattered into dust. A terrifying killing intent filled the room for a split second before he forced himself to calm down. Leave us, he whispered. Zhao Yan bowed and hurried out, a wicked smirk hidden from view. He knew Xiao Wuji's smile meant death for Li Wei and her attendant. Inside the hall, Xiao Wuji looked into the shadows. Go. Find out if what he said is true. Yes, master, a voice whispered from the air. An hour later, the shadow returned. Master, the rumors are everywhere among the disciples. Xiao Wuji's face twisted. I gave her a chance, and she threw it away for a slave. A few days later, Li Wei received a sect mission. It was a standard task. Go to the Poison Dragon Swamp and collect 10 inner cores from 3 patterned pit vipers. It was a bit far, but the difficulty was low. Suspecting nothing, she grabbed me and headed out. Fang Yun, Li Wei said as we flew on her immortal tool. I shouldn't have brought you to a place like this. but I was worried someone would cause trouble for you if I left you behind. Just stay back and hide. Killing these vipers is easy for me. My clone, sitting at the edge of the flying tool, opened his eyes and gave a short, blunt nod. Okay. Li Wei gritted her teeth. You're so boring. I'm being a kind master, and all you give me is okay? She had realized over the past few weeks that I was a cultivation maniac. I didn't care about women, status, or her beauty. I just wanted to get stronger. It drove her crazy being ignored by a man who was technically her subordinate. How many apertures have you opened? She asked, trying to break the silence. Why do you always hide your aura? My clone looked at her, annoyed. Nothing is wrong. Please don't disturb my meditation. Thank you. You're my attendant. How dare you speak to me like that? I am not your attendant, my clone said calmly. I agreed to stay by your side for 100 years and look after your family once I'm strong enough. That is all. Li Wei clenched her fists, her face red. She wanted to scream, but she remembered my potential as an ascender. She took a deep breath. Fine, but I provided your resources. Telling me your progress isn't asking too much. My clone hesitated, then dropped the concealment technique. Li Wei's jaw hit the floor. Void Immortal Level 2, she gasped. She rubbed her eyes and checked again with her divine sense. It had only been 2 months. To break through a level that fast was unheard of. She started to giggle like a little girl who had found a hidden treasure, but she quickly covered her mouth when my clone shot her a look of pure disdain. He closed his eyes and went back to training. Li Wei didn't bother him again. She just stood there, stealing glances at him, feeling incredibly proud of herself for discovering him. Soon, we arrived at the poison dragon swamp. The air was thick with toxic green mist. The miasma here is poisonous, Li Wei said, tossing me a pill. Take this. We both swallowed the antidotes and stepped into the murky woods, moving silently into the heart of the swamp. We were so focused on the task that we didn't notice the eyes watching us from the shadows. Several eyes watched us from the shadows, cold and calculating. I could feel the malice in the air. Is everything ready? Xiao Wuji asked, looking at the maidservant beside him. Don't worry, young master. Feng Yuan replied, though her expression was slightly troubled. I've set up an elven array for hundreds of miles. No messages are getting out. Zhao Yan let out a greasy laugh. Senior brother Xiao, with that detoxification pill to help things along, you'll definitely get what you want today. Deep in the swamp, Li Wei was putting on a show of power. She was locked in combat with several 3-patterned poison pythons. These beasts had massive snake bodies, but human-like torsos covered in scales. They snapped at her with fangs dripping with green venom, but Li Wei was fast. She dodged every spray of poison with a graceful leap. Die, she shouted. Her silk waist ribbon whipped out, knocking 2 pythons back. Her immortal sword danced like a butterfly, flashing with light. In a heartbeat, she sliced 2 of the monsters in half. The others didn't last much longer. She retrieved the monster cores and flew back toward my clone, a smug, proud smile on her face. But suddenly, she shuddered. Her body jerked, and she began to fall from the sky. What's happening? She gasped, barely steadying herself. She looked pale. She told me she felt weak, and her skin was starting to flush with a strange heat. My clone frowned. Suddenly, he felt it too, a weird ripple in his own energy. The antidote, I realized through him. It's poisoned. Li Wei's face went white. We have to go? Someone set us up. A loud laugh echoed through the trees. 7 or 8 figures drifted out of the mist, looking completely relaxed. When Li Wei saw the leader, her fear turned to rage. Xiao Wuji, you arranged this sect mission. That's right, Xiao Wuji sneered. His eyes wandered shamelessly over Li Wei's curves. Li Wei scrambled to swallow a different pill and forced one into my clone's mouth. Then she pulled out a jade signaling charm. Xiao Wuji didn't even try to stop her. He just watched with a mocking grin. A moment later, Li Wei's face fell. The jade charm was dead. The pills did nothing. Instead, the heat in her body grew more intense, making her dizzy and weak. It's not poison, Zhao Yan mocked, stepping forward. He was clearly the one behind the chemistry. It's a charm aphrodisiac. There is no cure, unless you count senior brother Xiao. Li Wei's heart sank. Xiao Wuji, you wouldn't dare. Aren't you afraid of the sect's punishment? My family will destroy you. Li Wei, don't be naive. Xiao Wuji laughed. He glanced at my clone with pure disgust. Exactly, Zhao Yan added. Once the rice is cooked, will your family really start a blood feud over something that's already happened? They'll probably just force the marriage to save face, especially given senior brother Zhao's father is a golden immortal. My clone watched them silently. Meanwhile, miles away in Moon City, my main body felt the distress call. I opened my eyes from my meditation. My clones are expendable, but I don't like being bullied. Li Wei had been helpful to me, and I don't like leaving debts unpaid. I shifted my consciousness, taking full control of the clone in the swamp. I looked at the group. Xiao Wuji was at the 6th level of the Void Immortal Realm. His 2 maids were at the 8th. The others were weaker. It would be a challenge, but not an impossible one. Especially since I saw Zhao Yan standing there, looking smug. My killing intent started to simmer. I hadn't planned on hunting him down, but since he walked right into my hands, he was a dead man. Li Wei, go, I said, giving her a shove. I'll hold them off. She froze, looking at my back. You're only at the 2nd level. How can you stop them? She bit her lip, then stepped back to my side. No, you go? They want me. I won't let you die because of me. I was stunned. She was actually kind? How she had survived this long in a world of cultivators was a miracle. We're leaving together, I said. I grabbed her hand and flew toward the tree line. At the same time, I triggered my trump card. Thousands of meters away, I summoned 100 of my clones in their black combat forms. They moved through the shadows, flanking Xiao Wuji's group. Xiao Wuji was losing his patience. Seeing us struggle together only made him angrier. Grab them, he barked. Before his men could move, 100 dark figures blurred into view. They moved as one, forming a massive sword array. A golden light erupted, forming a giant blade that seemed to split the sky. Xiao Wuji and his crew panicked. They had no idea where these people came from. Protect the young master, the 2 maidservants screamed. They were the strongest and reacted first. They threw out a golden bell artifact that expanded instantly. The giant golden sword slammed into the bell. The shockwave turned the surrounding trees into dust. The 2 maids spat out blood, their faces turning beet red from the impact. The bell was high quality. It actually managed to stop the first strike. I narrowed my eyes. 1 strike wasn't enough? Fine. I raised my hand, coordinating the immortal power of all 99 clones behind me. 100 shadows merged. A sword made of pure white light condensed in the air, humming with the terrifying power of Gung Gold sword intent. Slash. The light fell like a falling star. The maidservant named Piao Shui screamed in terror. She sprayed a mouthful of essence blood onto the bell to boost its power. Young master, do something. We can't hold it. Xiao Wuji stood there, frozen. He had been so busy playing the predator that he didn't realize he had just stepped into a meat grinder. Xiao Wuji finally snapped out of his trance, his body trembling violently. You too. Hold on, he roared, his voice cracking with desperation. I have a true fire talisman from the ancestor. It can kill a true immortal. He barely finished speaking before my giant light sword slammed down. The impact was deafening. The golden bell artifact couldn't handle the pressure and sank dozens of meters into the mud. The explosive celestial energy surged downward, crushing everything in its path. Xiao Wuji and his followers sprayed mouthfuls of blood instantly. The 2 maidservants, Piao Shui and Hong Mei, took the brunt of the hit. Their protective light flickered and died, and the golden bell tumbled from the sky, dull and broken. Xiao Wuji didn't wait. He activated the true fire talisman in his hand. A sea of flames erupted, surging toward my 100 clones. I frowned. My clones shifted their hand seals instantly, changing the sword array from offense to defense. Thousands of sword lights swirled, creating a massive, glowing shield. But even then, a wave of unease washed over me. The flames were unnatural. My sword lights began to glow red, melting like molten lava under the heat. In a heartbeat, the space where my 100 clones stood was swallowed by a roaring inferno. Seeing his enemies engulfed in fire, Xiao Wuji's cowardice vanished. He stood up, smoothing his robes and laughing like a maniac. Ha ha! Burn! Burn to ashes! His lackey, Zhao Yan, was still shaking but managed to squeeze out a compliment. Young master is mighty. You're invincible. Young master, we need to leave now, Piao Shui urged, her face pale. Those dark figures are too strange. Suddenly, their smiles froze. The sea of fire was still raging, but 20 dark figures emerged from the other side. They were covered in flames, looking like demons crawling out of hell. The moment they appeared, they didn't say a word. They just charged straight at the group. I was furious. That true fire had been stronger than I expected. It had incinerated 8 of my clones instantly. I had managed to pull the rest into my system space just in time, but 20 of them were still burning. The fire seemed to feed on their internal energy, refusing to go out until they were dead. Fine. If they were going to burn, they would burn for a reason. I commanded the flaming clones to teleport. They reappeared right on top of Xiao Wuji's group. Go, I whispered. The burning clones didn't hesitate. They ignited their remaining celestial power and turned themselves into living bombs. Asterisk boom, 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 asterisk. A series of massive explosions tore through the swamp. When the smoke finally cleared, the area where Xiao Wuji had been standing was nothing but a massive, smoking crater. I looked down from the sky, surprised. Still alive. At the bottom of the pit, Xiao Wuji was a mess. He was sprawled out, coughing up blood, his face twisted in terror. However, his expensive robes were glowing with celestial light, and a jade pendant at his waist was pulsing with energy. Those artifacts had barely managed to save his life. Everyone else, including Zhao Yin and the maids, had been turned into dust. Must be nice to have a powerful background, I muttered. He had more lives than a cockroach. I knew his ancestor was the Yenyun Golden Immortal. If I killed him now, would the old man sense it immediately? I didn't want to take that risk yet, but I couldn't just let him walk away. A wicked idea formed in my mind. I summoned my succubus demon clone. She walked into the pit with elegant, predatory steps toward the dying Xiao Wuji. A moment later, the heavily injured man stood up, his eyes glazed and manic. Nearby, a group of 3-vined poison pythons, hideous creatures with human torsos and snake tails, were also acting strangely under the clone's influence. It was a match made in hell. I watched for a few seconds before the scene became too disturbing to witness. I wish you two a happy life together, I said, turning away. Suddenly, I felt a mental tug. It was the clone I had sent with Li Wei. Master, I have a problem. You need to handle this. I frowned. Weren't they far away by now? I shifted my consciousness into that clone's body. The moment I took control, I felt something soft and warm pressing against me. Hands were frantically tearing at my clothes. Because of the physical connection to the clone, a wave of intense, drug-induced heat hit me instantly. I realized what was happening. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, I thought. My clones are going to be the death of me. An hour passed. The small grove was a wreck, with scraps of torn clothing scattered across the grass. You? Lin Yuan. You bastard. Li Wei's voice was trembling. She held a sword to my clone's throat, her eyes brimming with tears. The blade was a fraction of an inch from my neck. My clone remained calm, though my main consciousness was scrambling. Master, you can't just leave me like this, the clone's subconscious pleaded. I took a deep breath and spoke through the clone. Put your clothes on first. Li Wei shrieked, finally realizing her state. She scrambled to cover herself. A few minutes later, we were both dressed. My clone remained stoic, as if nothing had happened, which only made her angrier. I know it wasn't intentional, I said calmly. It was the drug. Please, just forget it. I am a cultivator focused only on the Tao. I have no interest in these things. Li Wei exploded. What does that mean? You're just going to walk away? I should be the one saying that. I'll kill you. She lunged with her sword again. I just looked at her. Go ahead. If you kill me, my mission is over, and I'll just return to where I came from. She froze, her emotions a chaotic mess. Could she really kill me? Over the past few days, she had been impressed by my strength and the way I told her to run while I faced danger alone. She was moved, but she wasn't ready for this. She glared at me, her teeth gritted. Finally, she lowered her sword and summoned her flying boat to leave. I hopped on right behind her. My mission was to protect her until the deal was done, and I wasn't leaving until it was. Who said you could come up here? She snapped. Fine, I'll leave, I said, turning around. Wait, she hesitated. If I left, Our agreement was void, and she had sacrificed too much for that to happen. The boat took off, carrying two people who refused to look at each other. Meanwhile, in the Yinyun immortal sect, the Yinyun golden immortal opened his eyes. Dead, he whispered. Xiao Wuji was his great-grandson. He liked the boy because he reminded him of his younger self. He wasn't heartbroken, but he felt insulted. Killing his descendant was a direct challenge to his authority. I want to see who dared to touch him. The golden immortal sneered. He performed a quick divination, then stepped through space. In an instant, he appeared at the edge of the smoking crater in the swamp. When he saw what was happening at the bottom of that pit, his face twitched with pure, unadulterated rage. With a wave of his hand, a silent, invisible force swept through the forest, turning miles of swamp and everything in it into nothingness. Xiao Yinyun descended into the crater, his silhouette flickering like a dying flame. He waved his hand, showering a soft, golden light over the mangled remains of Xiao Wuji. The body was barely recognizable as human, but under the light, the air above it began to ripple. Images flickered into existence, blurry, fragmented memories of what had happened. All this for a woman, Xiao Yinyun hissed. You useless brat. He cursed his descendant's stupidity, but a second later, his pupils shrank. He leaned in, his breath catching. In the projection, a swarm of dark shadows had appeared out of thin air, swarming Xiao Wuji and his guards with terrifying precision. They were strange, lethal, and moved with a coordination that defied logic. Xiao Yinyun's heart hammered against his ribs. Are those Shame demons? His eyes erupted with golden light as he tried to divine their origin. He pushed his senses to the limit, scouring the karmic threads of the world, but he found nothing. The shadows hadn't even touched Xiao Wuji's belongings. They had just killed and vanished. A chilling thought crossed his mind, something from the oldest legends, a race that should have been extinct. Impossible, he whispered, his body trembling slightly. It's absolutely impossible. Meanwhile, back at the Yinyun immortal sect, a shadow stood silently in the air above Li Wei's residence. I didn't know it was there, and neither did she. The figure watched for a long time before vanishing into the void. Back in his grand hall, Xiao Yinyun spoke to the empty air. Keep eyes on Li Wei, he ordered. Report any abnormality immediately, and watch that attendant of hers too. Far away in Moon City, I was relaxing in my manor. I had set up 2 layers of concealment arrays, one I bought at auction and one I built myself. In this world, there was nothing more important than being steady. If you couldn't be steady, you had to be even steadier. I was living the dream. While other cultivators were out there bleeding for resources, I was lying back, being served by Shame demons. If anyone saw me, they'd call me lazy or claim I was wasting my talent. They didn't realize that even while I was lying flat, my cultivation was skyrocketing. It had been 5 days since I hit the 4th level of the virtual immortal realm. Thanks to the frantic, 24-hour labor of my 5,000 clones, I had opened 6 more immortal apertures. In 5 more days, I'd be ready to break through to the 5th level. It felt like I was riding a rocket. The best part? Every bit of this power was solid. I didn't use shortcuts with side effects. I just used raw, hard work, done by other versions of me. This was the true immortal life. I stayed hidden in the city, safe and sound, while my clones did the dirty work, earned the money, and took the blame for my actions. If I got bored, I just hopped into a clone's mind for a walk. I was surprised that the news of Xiao Wuji's death hadn't caused an uproar in the sect yet. I made a mental note to stay alert. Then, I checked my system storage to look at my stash of immortal crystals. I hadn't checked in a while because I'd hit a bottleneck with the number of clones I could summon. When I saw the number, I nearly choked. I blinked and checked again. 190 million medium-grade immortal crystals. If I converted those to low-grade, it was 1.9 billion. My mouth quirked up into a smile. I tried to look serious, then failed, then tried again. I looked like a madman. My brain, now as fast as a supercomputer, did the math instantly. At level 3, a clone could mine 2,000 crystals a day. At level 4, that jumped to 6,000. 5,000 clones working for 9 days. The math was simple, but the result was staggering. At this rate, I'm going to drain that mine dry, I muttered. I was actually worried about the mine's longevity. My 5,000 clones were doing the work of 300,000 normal miners. I needed to move. Crystals were just rocks until they were exchanged for currency. I sent clone number 1 back to the Wanbao Immortal Association. Su Qian, the manager, greeted my clone with a look of pure envy. He was wearing high-end silks now, clearly enjoying the promotion he'd earned from our last deal. Senior, thanks to you, I've been promoted to senior group leader, Su Qian said, beaming. Congratulations, my clone said coldly. So what brings you here today? He asked expectantly. I'm here to exchange crystals. When my clone handed over the storage bag, Su Qian actually stumbled. He hit the floor, his face pale. Last time, I'd exchanged 160 million. This time was on a whole different level. The commotion brought out his boss, Fu Qingzhu. He arrived and stared at my clone, trying to pierce through the disguise to see my true background. Even he was shaken. 1.9 billion low-grade crystals in cash was a staggering amount of liquidity. Even top-tier sects didn't keep that much walking around money on hand. Fu Qingzhu clearly suspected I had just robbed an immortal mine. But he didn't care. Business was business. He handed over the 1.9 billion crystals with trembling hands. Honored guest, carrying this much cash is dangerous, Fu Qingzhu suggested. We can store it for you. You can withdraw it at any branch, and we'll even pay you interest. No need, my clone replied. Store it with them? I had a system space that was more secure than any bank in the heavens. I spent about 100 million on every kind of high-level pill I could find, just for the hell of it. I felt the rush of throwing money around, yet I still had so much left I couldn't possibly spend it all. Back at the manor, I popped an immortal pill like it was a piece of candy. I had the money, I had the power, and I had the safety. Now, I just had to figure out what to do with the rest of it. It only took a few breaths for my clones to refine the high-level pills I'd just bought. Their energy was absorbed completely, leaving me refreshed but restless. I started thinking about the future. I needed to find more ways to burn through my massive wealth while increasing my power. Alchemy, weapon forging, and array formations seemed like the best options. Most cultivators avoided these because they were massive time sinks and resource drains. But I was different. For me, these skills would only cost a bit of my time. Just as I was planning my next move, a voice rang out in my mind. It was Yin Xingji, the guard captain I had under my thumb. Master, it's bad. It collapsed. The mine collapsed. I froze. What happened? The brothers dug too deep. They brought the whole vein down. I immediately shifted my consciousness to the mining site. The ground was roaring like an angry dragon. The earth groaned and shook violently. One accidental collapse in a single tunnel had triggered a massive chain reaction across the entire sector. It was a total accident. My mining army had been stripping the ore so fast that one squad accidentally took out a structural pillar hidden deep within the vein. They didn't even have time to fix it before the ceiling gave way. The noise was deafening, and it immediately drew the attention of the law enforcement teams. Yin Xingji had rushed to the scene and reported to me the second it happened. I had to act fast. I didn't hesitate. I sent a sliver of my will into every squad and began recalling them. One by one, 5,000 clones vanished into thin air, retreating back into my system space. But I wasn't fast enough to avoid everyone. On the highest peak of the canyon, in a secluded cave dwelling, the true immortal in charge of the mine was jolted awake. Ling Yun. He was a powerful true immortal who had been in deep meditation for months. Being disturbed during cultivation made him furious. His divine sense swept across the area like a tidal wave. When he realized the mine was collapsing, his anger turned to shock. He could feel it. The immortal essence of the entire vein had dropped significantly. It was as if the heart of the mountain had been hollowed out. Who dares? Ling Yun's eyes flashed with golden light. He moved like a bolt of lightning, diving straight into the collapsing tunnels. He ignored the falling rocks and debris, pushing toward the core of the collapse. He wanted to know why his mine was falling apart and where all the energy had gone. Amidst the dust and falling stone, he spotted a dark figure. It was one of my clones, one of the few that hadn't made it into the system space in time. Ling Yun stopped, stunned. The figure was pitch black, featureless, and emitted absolutely no aura. It was like looking into a void. As he stared, The dark figure looked back at him. It gave a creepy, mocking smile. Then, without a second thought, it self-destructed. At that same moment, in a dozen other tunnels, the remaining clones who couldn't escape did the exact same thing. They chose death over capture. Ling Yun reacted instantly, reaching out with a massive hand of immortal energy to grab the corpse of the clone. He stared at the remains, his heart racing. He had never seen a creature like this in his entire life. But before he could examine it further, the body vanished. Even under the crushing pressure of a true immortal's power, the corpse simply ceased to exist. Ling Yun's pupils shrank. These dark figures weren't particularly strong, but the way they functioned sent a chill down his spine. They reminded him of something ancient and terrifying. "I was only gone for a few months," he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "What has happened to my mind?" He flew out of the rubble and immediately spotted the deputy manager, Huidu, who was running around in a panic. "Where is Yin Xingji?" Huidu was screaming at his subordinates. "Where is that bastard?" Ling Yun landed in front of him, his presence heavy enough to crack the ground. "Huidu, look at what you've done." With a flick of his sleeve, a beam of immortal light slammed into Huidu's fat body, sending him flying into the cliffside. The pressure of a true immortal washed over the entire camp, silencing everyone. They were all terrified, huddled like winter cicadas. A few minutes later, a half-dead Huidu was dragged back. Yin Xingji was nowhere to be found. "Tell me everything that has happened recently," Ling Yun commanded, standing in midair. "If you hide a single word, I will kill you myself." If Huidu wasn't the descendant of Ling Yun's junior brother, he would have been a bloodstain on the rocks already. Trembling and coughing up blood, Huidu confessed everything he knew. "You saw these creatures before?" Ling Yun roared. "And you didn't report it?" "Master, uncle, mercy." Huidu put his head in the dirt, sweating bullets. He was cursing Yin Xingji's entire family tree in his head. Everything was supposed to be fine. How did it end up like this? Ling Yun snorted, and the sheer vibration made Huidu spit out more blood. The captain who had been on duty with Yin Xingji wasn't so lucky. Since he didn't have a powerful background, Ling Yun killed him with a single thought. "This is no small matter," Ling Yun told the new captain he appointed on the spot. "Increase the guard. I'm going back to the sect." He grabbed the broken Huidu and vanished. Soon, at the Yunfan Immortal Sect, the Elder Council gathered. They stared at the projected image of the dark figure Ling Yun had encountered. The room fell into a heavy silence. "Could it be the Devouring Tribe?" one elder whispered. The room grew cold. The Devouring Tribe was a nightmare in the immortal realm. Creatures that consumed everything spiritual in their path. "Impossible," a Taoist on the left replied. "They were suppressed eons ago. Besides, if they were here, they wouldn't just steal a bit of ore. It would be a realm-level disaster." The others nodded in relief. "True, Brother Qingyi is right." Then, an elder on the right spoke up. "Don't you think it looks a bit like the legendary primal race?" The silence that followed was deathly. A few elders actually started shaking. After a long minute, the head elder glared at the man who spoke. "Don't talk nonsense, junior brother Fuguang. The primal race? Those things are gods among men. These black figures are far too weak. If it were really one of them, Ling Yun would be a corpse right now." The tension broke, and the elders started laughing nervously. Right. Just a joke to lighten the mood," Fuguang said, wiping sweat from his brow. The head elder looked at Ling Yun. "Don't overthink it. They aren't that strong. If we can capture one alive, we'll know what they are. Ling Yun, I'm leaving this to you." "Yes, senior brother." While they were plotting to catch my clones, I was back in Music City, feeling incredibly annoyed. I was currently standing in my system space, cursing out the 5,000 clones lined up in front of me. My voice boomed through the misty space like a god's wrath. The clones stood there like guilty children, their heads hanging low. Losing a few clones didn't hurt. They'd respawn the next day, but the commotion was the problem. Now the Yunfan Immortal Sect would be on high alert. That meant I couldn't go back to withdraw more money for a long time. "You lot are too careless," I yelled. "You're nothing like me. How do you manage to collapse a whole mine? You're delaying my retirement." I spent the next hour lecturing them on the way of the dog, my personal philosophy of staying hidden, being cautious, and playing it safe. The clones listened intently, soaking in my wisdom. As I spoke, something strange happened. I felt a weird feedback from the clones, a fuzzy, spiritual understanding of the way of the dog. I blinked, stunned. Was there actually a great Tao of cowardice? My eyes lit up. If there was, I was going to be the master of it. I took a deep breath and started yelling even louder. I lectured my clones for a full hour before I finally ran out of steam. Once the scolding was over, it was time to get back to work, but with a new strategy. I handpicked 30 clones for a special mission. 10 Wood Element clones, 10 Fire Element clones, and 10 Blood Shadow clones. I ordered them to scatter across the distant realms, traveling far and wide to seek out opportunities and gather information. To keep myself safe, I gave each of them a completely unique appearance. None of them looked anything like my true self. I even went a step further and wiped their memories of my existence. If someone captured them and tried a soul search, they'd find nothing but a fake backstory I'd implanted. My instructions were simple. If you find a treasure, tell me. If you hit a problem you can handle, tell me. But if you run into a crisis you can't escape, just die. Don't lead them back to me. With a wave of my hand, I sent them off. These 30 were just the pioneers. If they were successful, I'd send out hundreds more. I watched them go, secretly hoping one of them would strike it rich so I could ride their coattails to the top. But I wasn't putting all my eggs in one basket. I took another 100 clones, led by Fong Xian, and sent them into the territories of the 3 great immortal sects. I wanted them to build a secret society, a testing ground for a new organization I called Sitian. It was an assassin guild with 2 goals: hunt for immortal crystals and gather intelligence. Clones were perfect for assassinations. They were disposable, untraceable, and relentless. I gave Fong Xian 10 million low-grade crystals as startup capital and turned them loose in Silver Moon City. With that settled, I turned my focus back to myself. Since mining was too risky for now, I put my remaining 9,800 clones to work on cultivation. With their combined efforts, my training speed skyrocketed to 5,000 times the normal rate. 2 days later, all 12 of my immortal apertures snapped open. I had broken through to the 5th level of the virtual immortal realm. Meanwhile, back at the Yunfan Immortal Sect, my clone Shui Yun was sitting in the Fuguang Palace. The sect leader, Master Fuguang, was busy lecturing a group of disciples. Suddenly, the immortal energy around Shui Yun surged. In front of everyone, he smoothly transitioned into the 5th level. Master Fuguang stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening in shock. Shui Yun, you've reached the 5th level already. Yes, Master, I replied through the clone, keeping my head bowed. Listening to your wisdom triggered an epiphany. My energy just started moving on its own, and I broke through. It was a total lie, but it worked. Fuguang's eyes lit up with excitement. An epiphany? Those were rare. He started wondering if he'd stumbled upon a hidden genius, someone who could eventually rival the top monsters of the sect. He looked at me like I was a piece of unpolished jade. Excellent, he praised, smiling broadly. My fellow disciples offered their congratulations, though I could see the jealousy in their eyes. I decided to lean into the act. Master, ever since I formed my grotto heaven at level 4, my speed has been, well, incredibly fast. Is it dangerous to break through this quickly? The other disciples nearly choked. To them, I sounded like a total show-off, constantly mentioning my grotto heaven and complaining about being too talented. They didn't realize I was just trying to normalize my rapid growth, so they wouldn't be suspicious when I hit level 6 next week. After the lecture, Master Fuguang pulled me aside. Yun'er, I wasn't going to let you join the upcoming sect competition because you were too new. But now that you've reached the 5th level, I want you to try. It's a selection process for a secret realm trial that's about to open. A secret realm? Now that caught my attention. I thanked him and hurried back to my private cave to report the news to my main body. Master, I found an opportunity. The top 3 prizes are massive. Back in Silver Moon City, I grinned. This was exactly what I wanted. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on all my clones. The fire clones in the Heaven Sword sect were still stuck playing servant to that little fairy, Mo Lin. They hadn't found a way to steal the treasure yet, but they had earned her trust. She was even starting to give them pointers on their cultivation. I told them to keep waiting for the right moment. As for the 30 explorers I'd sent out, the results were mixed. 3 of them got caught in the crossfire of a battle between true immortals, and were instantly vaporized. 2 others were captured and turned into mounts by some high-level cultivators. I had them self-destruct immediately. Most were just wandering aimlessly, but one human clone actually got lucky. An elder from the Golden Khan Immortal Palace took a liking to him and brought him back to their sect as a disciple. The ones who died were just unlucky, I guess. I simply respawned them as new labor clones and sent a fresh batch of explorers out to take their place. The web was spreading, and sooner or later, I was going to catch something big. My exploration team was struggling. The immortal realm was vast, and opportunities didn't just fall from the sky. Even with my scouts spreading out, I had fewer than 30 clones actually finding anything useful. I felt a bit frustrated, so I shifted my consciousness back to the Slaying Heaven organization. Fong Sun No. 1, my very first clone in this group, was proving to be a real veteran. I took direct control of him to see how things were progressing. It turned out that the 100 clones I'd sent to infiltrate local forces had been busy. They had split up and joined over 20 different small and medium-sized sects. With their level 5 false immortal cultivation and high combat strength, they'd quickly become core members. A few had even worked their way up to home master positions. Fong Sun No. 1 himself was currently the second-in-command of a small sect in the central region, using it as a secret communication hub for Slaying Heaven. Because they were spread so thin, they were gathering an incredible amount of intelligence. They had also started putting out feelers in the underworld. Their pitch was simple. We kill anyone below level 6 false immortal. We kill them, and we bury them. Clean and professional. The pricing depended on the target's difficulty. They had already completed one hit and had another in progress. The first job, assassinating a level 5 Hall Master, had earned me 100,000 low-grade immortal crystals. I couldn't help but give Fong Sun No. 1 a mental thumbs up. The money was pocket change for now, but this was just practice. Once my clones reached the true immortal stage, Slaying Heaven would become a nightmare for even the biggest sects. Master, Fong Sun No. 1 sent a mental message, sounding a bit hesitant. We have a problem with the current contract. The target is one of our own. Should I kill him to protect our reputation, or should I take out the client instead? I almost laughed when I looked into it. The client was a second-in-command who was jealous of a rising star in his sect. That rising star was, of course, one of my clones. The idiot had no idea that the assassins he was hiring were the same people he was trying to kill. Why would we kill our own? I replied immediately. Kill the client. Our reputation will be fine. If this happens again, always take out the one holding the purse. Understood, Master, he replied. A few hours later, that unlucky second-in-command invited my target clone out for a secret meeting, expecting to watch him die. Instead, he was the one who ended up dead, leaving no trace behind. My clone inherited his assets and stepped right into his position as the new second-in-command. Meanwhile, back at the Cloud Sea Immortal Sect, things were heating up. My clone Shui Yun was in the middle of a tournament match. He stood on the stage with his long blood-red hair tied back, gripping a crimson spear. Blood-red energy swirled around the weapon like a roaring dragon. He was absolutely dominating his opponent, a level 5 false immortal. The crowd was roaring. I noticed several female disciples watching with stars in their eyes. Senior brother Yun is so strong and handsome, one whispered. I heard he's Master Fu Guang's favorite new disciple, another added. You're just obsessed, a third teased. He's from the Bloodshale race. They have 5 kidneys. You couldn't handle him. I decided to take full control of Shui Yun. Staying in Silver Moon City was getting boring, and if there was glory to be won, I wanted to experience it firsthand. I swung the spear, feeling its weight. I was using a technique called the 13 Dragon Cries, something Shui Yun had traded for using sect contribution points. It was a solid, grounded technique, perfect for hiding my true abilities. Junior brother Wei Ji, I said, pointing the spear at my opponent. If you don't surrender, my next strike might actually hurt you. Wei Ji's face turned purple. He had been in the sect for decades, and here I was, a recruit of less than a month, calling him junior brother. Don't get cocky, he roared. He leaped into the air, his immortal essence glowing as he unleashed a flurry of punches. A tide of golden fist prints crashed toward me like a tsunami. Raging Wave God Fist, 8th form. The girls in the crowd gasped, worried for their handsome senior brother. I just smirked. I didn't dodge. I charged straight into the storm. The world is vast, and the moon is like a hook. I shouted, my spear spinning into a blur of blood-red light. I unleashed a strike that looked like a rising crimson moon, surrounded by thousands of silk-like energy threads. We crossed paths in midair. The golden tide of his punches turned red and shattered. Wei Ji sprayed a mouthful of blood and collapsed. I landed softly, pulling my spear back to my side. Shui Yun wins, the referee announced. Up in the VIP stands, my master, True Immortal Fu Guang, was beaming. He turned to a rival True Immortal next to him and started gloating. I remember you recruited a Bloodshale disciple recently too, didn't you? How's he doing compared to my boy? The other immortal looked like he'd swallowed a fly. His disciple was only at level 1. Don't get too excited, Fu Guang, he hissed. His next opponent is likely Aoli Wei. She's at level 6. He doesn't stand a chance. I hopped off the stage and walked over to my master. Well done, Fu Guang said, though his expression turned serious. But your next fight is against that girl, Aoli Wei. She's a level 6 false immortal. Just do your best. I sat down and started meditating, pretending to recover my energy. The tournament was massive, with over 1,000 mid-stage false immortals competing. They were narrowing it down to the top 30 for the final round. Those 30 would then fight for the top 3 spots on the main podiums. I closed my eyes, planning my next move. Being a genius was fun, but I had to make sure I didn't show too much. Just enough to win. The rules for the final rounds were simple. Once the time limit expired, whoever was still standing on the stage took the top 3 spots. I was in Group 5. So was Aoli Wei. I had kept a close eye on her for a long time. We had a history, after all, and I knew her moves better than she realized. I sat through the first 2 matches, eyes closed, letting my mind drift. When the 3rd round was called, I stepped onto the stage. My red hair caught the light, and I could feel Aoli Wei's eyes on me. She held her sword with a cold, distant grace. You are only at level 5, she said, her voice flat. I'll give you the first move. I knew she didn't like me. Between my flashy appearance and my aggressive fighting style, she thought I was just a show-off. To her, I didn't have half the character of her own attendant, Lin Yuan. I almost laughed. If only she knew she was looking at the same man. Watch yourself, junior sister, I said, a smirk playing on my lips. I'm a cave heaven false immortal. I'm not as weak as I look. I didn't give her time to respond. I lunged forward. My spear became a blur, 10 sharp thrusts whistling through the air toward her. Aoli Wei frowned and raised her sword to block. The collision sent a massive shockwave through the arena. The void itself seemed to hum from the impact. Her eyes widened. She could feel it now. My celestial energy was just as thick and vast as hers. The slight look of contempt on her face vanished instantly. She realized this wasn't going to be an easy win. We clashed again and again. The stage became a chaotic masterpiece of sword light and spear shadows. Dragon roars echoed through the air as I pushed my technique to the limit. The crowd was starting to roar, too. Senior brother Shui Yun is incredible, one of the younger disciples shouted. He's actually matching Sister Li Wei strike for strike. I felt the thrill of the fight. I was using the Dragon Roar 13 spears, pushing all the way to the 8th form. My spear moved like a storm, sweeping across the stage with the force of 10,000 soldiers. It was relentless. It was overwhelming. Aoli Wei was visibly shaken. She knew how difficult this spear technique was to master. Seeing me perform the 8th spear with such precision made her realize she was facing a true monster. She bit her lip and performed a series of rapid hand seals. Her sword glowed with a deep purple light. Suddenly, it split into hundreds of shimmering blades, forming a lethal array in midair. Ziwei sword shadows, she cried out. The purple blades rained down like a meteor shower. They collided with my spear light in a deafening explosion that shook the entire stadium. Smoke and dust filled the air. When it finally cleared, we were standing 100 meters apart, both of us still hovering in the air. I held my spear behind my back, breathing steadily. The crowd went silent, unable to tell who had the upper hand. But then, Aoli Wei did something unexpected. She lowered her sword and admitted defeat. She simply turned and flew off the stage. She knew the truth. We were evenly matched in that last exchange, but she knew I was from the Bloodshale clan. I hadn't even touched my berserk racial talent yet. If I flipped that switch, she wouldn't stand a chance. She chose to save her energy for the next round rather than lose everything here. Up in the VIP stands, my master Fu Guang was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. He was gloating to every true immortal within earshot. One of them, a sour-faced man, stood up and brushed his sleeves. "Don't get too excited, Fu Guang," he hissed. "He's lucky, but he's done. His next opponent is at the peak of level 6. He's going to lose." I heard him. I didn't leave the stage. Instead, I sat down right where I was and crossed my legs. The entire arena buzzed with confusion. Then, the confusion turned into a collective gasp. "Look, he's breaking through." It was true. Back in Moon City, my main body had reached a breaking point. With 10,000 clones working in unison, the sheer volume of cultivated energy had become a tidal wave. I couldn't stop the breakthrough even if I wanted to. I decided to lean into it. If I was going to be a genius, I would be the greatest genius they had ever seen. I let the celestial energy from the surrounding miles rush toward me. My body became a vortex, glowing with a blinding light. Master Fu Guang's jaw dropped. I had just reached level 5 a few days ago. To hit level 6 now was unheard of. Powerful divine senses swept over me as the elders tried to peer into my secrets. I didn't hide. I let them see my talent. A golden ripple erupted from my chest, and my aura surged, stabilizing at the 6th level of the false immortal realm. I opened my eyes and felt the raw, surging power in my limbs. I stood up, brushed the dust off my robes, and bowed to the crowd. "I had a sudden moment of insight during the fight," I said, my voice carrying across the stadium. "I apologize for the delay." My words hit the crowd like a physical shock. The reaction was instant and divided. Some disciples looked at me with pure disgust, thinking my humble apology was the height of arrogance. They saw me as a shameless show-off. But the others? Their eyes were practically sparkling. I could see the admiration glowing in their faces, like they wanted to throw their hearts right onto the stage for me. I didn't linger to enjoy the attention. I stepped off the platform and moved through the air, landing right beside my master, Old Kai. I gave him a small, sheepish bow. "Master, I apologize." I got distracted again and accidentally broke through. Old Kai's mouth twitched. He stared at me for a long time, his expression unreadable, before a small smile finally broke through. "Not bad," he said, "but don't try to teach me how to do it." I grinned. Understood. With that victory, I only had one opponent left in the group stages. I spent the afternoon resting, waiting for the sun to dip low in the sky. By the time I was called back up, the horizon was a sea of crimson clouds, matching the blood-red energy of my own cultivation. My final opponent was a young man named Shuafeng. He stood tall with an effortless grace, and I noticed faint green divine markings etched into his temples. I had done my homework. He was at the 6th level of the false immortal realm and hailed from the Gale Wolf tribe. Ironically, he also used a long spear. The referee gave the signal, and we both vanished. A split second later, the sky erupted with the screech of clashing metal. We moved like lightning, our silhouettes flickering across 100 different positions in the blink of an eye. In just a few breaths, we had exchanged hundreds of strikes. Neither of us used immortal arts yet. It was a pure contest of spear technique. Shuafeng was fluid and elusive, his spear moving like a gust of wind, unpredictable and stinging. I was the opposite. I poured my raw physical strength into every strike, my spear roaring like a dragon. Every collision sent shockwaves through the air, tearing the red clouds above us into jagged shreds. I was impressed. The Gale Wolf tribe's connection to the wind was no joke. I slammed my spear down, forcing him back, and a thought crossed my mind. I wanted his essence blood. Shuafeng wiped his chin and chuckled. "I didn't expect your spear skills to be this sharp, junior brother. But this ends now." He erupted with a brilliant green light. A massive phantom of a winged wolf appeared behind him, its eyes cold and its fangs bared. His speed doubled instantly. Before I could even blink, he was behind me. I felt the killing intent prickling my skin. I spun, bringing my spear up just in time. The impact sent me flying backward. Shuo Feng didn't give me a second to breathe. The wolf phantom blurred, and he was on me again, raining down strikes that I could barely parry. From the stands, I heard the elders whispering. They thought I was done for. Even old Kai looked worried, though he kept his voice steady. My disciple is from the Bloodshard tribe, he barked at a critic. He has his own tricks. He was right. I was being suppressed because I lacked a top-tier movement art, but I wasn't losing. I just needed a window. I took a deep breath, gathered my immortal energy, and suddenly slammed a palm into the empty air behind me. The recoil acted like a thruster, stabilizing my body instantly. Then, I triggered my racial talent, Berserk. My blood began to boil. A violent, bloodthirsty heat rushed to my head, and my hair flared out like a crimson mane. My strength and speed surged by 50%. My vision turned red, and my mind grew dark and aggressive. I roared and lunged. My spear was no longer just a weapon. It was a screaming blood dragon. Shuo Feng's eyes widened in terror. He tried to block, but the sheer force of my strike turned his arms numb instantly. I didn't stop. I smashed, hacked, and thrust with relentless fury. His speed advantage was gone, crushed under my raw power. I drove him down hundreds of meters toward the earth. Shuo Feng coughed up a spray of bright red blood. My eyes lit up. I used my blood energy to swirl out and snatch the floating droplets, tucking them away. Every time we collided, he bled, and every time he bled, I took it. Once I had enough, I decided the play was over. It's done, I yelled. I unleashed the 11th form of the 13 Dragon Cry spears. A massive, snarling blood dragon materialized around my weapon and slammed into Shuo Feng with the weight of a mountain. The explosion shook the arena. Dirt and stone turned to dust as Shuo Feng was driven deep into a massive crater. When the smoke cleared, I was standing in the air, my blood-red aura fading as a wave of exhaustion hit me. Below me, Shuo Feng lay in the rubble, his clothes in tatters and his spirit broken. He looked up at me, dazed. He was at the 10th aperture of the 6th level, and I had just reached it, yet he hadn't just lost to a technique. He had been completely overpowered. The winner is Lin Yuan, the referee shouted. The crowd was silent for a heartbeat before erupting. The group stage was over. I had taken first place, Shuo Feng took second, and Li Wei managed to claw into third. The finals were in 2 days. I walked away from the stage as the crowd buzzed with my name. I had the blood I needed, and I had the top spot. Now, I just had to survive the final showdown. My flashy breakthrough on the stage caught more attention than I intended. Inside the Fuguang Immortal Palace, my master, Taoist Fuguang, sat in silence. He watched the blood-red clouds of my aura with flickering eyes, lost in thought. He was wondering if I was a true genius, a possessor of some secret treasure, or perhaps the reincarnation of an ancient immortal. I felt his gaze piercing through me, trying to uncover my secrets. He couldn't see anything, of course. The only way to truly know would be to search my soul. I sensed a flicker of hesitation in him. Soul searching was the easiest way to find the truth, but it was brutal and irreversible. We were master and disciple now, and our relationship was good. If he searched my soul, we would become mortal enemies. If I turned out to be a once-in-a-million-year genius, he would lose everything. In the vast immortal realm, geniuses weren't exactly rare. There was a monster in the Yunfan immortal sect who became a true immortal at 50. Compared to that, my rapid progress was impressive, but I was still just an ant. Until one reaches the true immortal realm and grasps the laws of the world, they are nothing. Many cultivators spend their entire lives stuck at the void immortal stage, never crossing that final threshold. Master's gaze made my skin crawl. My clone, who possessed all my memories of the fight, finally broke the silence. Master, why have you summoned me? Yuaner, he asked tentatively. Are you carrying some kind of legendary treasure? I acted surprised. No. Why would you ask that, Master? If you don't have one, why are you being so flashy? He grunted. Aren't you afraid people will grow greedy and target you? I played the part of the confused student perfectly. Master, I didn't mean to. I just had a sudden epiphany today and broke through. You told me epiphanies are great opportunities. I couldn't just throw it away, could I? Master's lip twitched. I could tell he thought I was being a bit of a brat. You've learned the 11th form of the 13 Dragon Cry spears, he asked, still shocked by my comprehension speed. Actually, master, it's the 13th form, I replied. He went silent. I had finished showing off for the day. My gains from this battle were massive. I had tested the strength of the Yunfan disciples, the power of my Blood Shadow clones, and identified my own weaknesses. You can read 10,000 books, but nothing beats a real fight. If you stay cooped up imagining the world, your understanding will always be superficial. Back in my private quarters, I sat on the meditation platform and reviewed the battle. My physical body was strong, and my techniques were sufficient for now, but my movement speed was lacking. If I had been faster today against Shuo Feng, I wouldn't have needed to trigger my berserk state. I looked at the large basin of blood I had collected from him. It wasn't essence blood, but I had enough of it to refine what I needed. I conjured a flame in my palm, wrapping it around the blood. The liquid boiled and evaporated until only a single, glowing drop of cyan blood remained. I hope this is enough to unlock the racial options, I whispered. As the blood entered my body, I checked the system. The racial selection tab flickered and changed. It worked. The Kuafing wolf tribe was rated as high quality. With a thought, I summoned a dark shadow clone and edited its race. The shadow warped and shifted, transforming into a tall, majestic cyan wolf. It looked exactly like Shuo Feng's phantom, a single horn on its head and wings on its back. I could feel the wind swirling around it. I shifted my consciousness into the wolf body and laughed. Its innate talent was gale, a natural affinity for wind laws. This changed everything. If I could collect more bloodlines, I could master multiple laws simultaneously. My main body's efficiency would skyrocket. I needed a movement technique. I sent my clone, Lin Yuan, to the sect's library. I picked out a wind-based movement art called Wind Escape, Traceless. The full version was too expensive, so I only bought the Void Immortal portion. It didn't require a deep understanding of laws to start, which was perfect. I tried practicing it with my main body first. I have a gun-gold soul, so my affinity for gold techniques is unmatched, but wind? I was average at best. It would take me years to master this. But when I switched to the Kuafing wolf clone, the progress was instant. Professional tasks should be left to professionals, I muttered. I summoned 99 more Kuafing wolf clones. I made sure each one looked different this time to avoid suspicion. 100 elegant, agile youths appeared in my mental space. Begin, I commanded. 100 clones started practicing the wind escape technique simultaneously. The mental space became a blur of shadows. At first, their movements were clunky, but as time passed, their collective insights flooded into my mind. My body began to feel lighter, as if the air itself was lifting me up. I started moving in the courtyard, testing my limits. The techniques were coming together, shadow splitting and traceless wind. Once I grasped the essence of the movement, I immediately transferred those insights to my clone, Shui Yun. Even though Shui Yun didn't have a natural affinity for wind, it didn't matter. I simply copied the comprehension directly into his mind. It was like downloading a file. As long as the clone wasn't an idiot, the lack of talent was irrelevant. To ensure I won the upcoming tournament and solidified Shui Yun's reputation as a peerless genius in the Yunfan Immortal sect, I pushed further. I had him exchange sect points for a powerful law-based technique called the For Absolute Heavens, which combined both offense and defense. Practice. All of you practice. I commanded. Time blurred. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. I looked out at the massive square of the Yunfan Immortal sect. 3 grand platforms floated high in the air, glowing with a faint, ethereal light. This was the final battle. Whoever held a platform at the end would claim their rank. The rewards were massive, and the rules were brutally simple. There were no rules. Group fights, one-on-ones, it didn't matter. When the 3 incense sticks burned out, whoever stood on a platform won. But there was a catch. The platforms were narrow, barely large enough for a single person to stand. The square was packed. Thousands of disciples were shouting, placing bets on who would take the top 3 spots. Senior brother Fan Xian has been at the peak of the 6th level for years, one disciple argued. He's definitely taking first place. What about Xiaoyan? Another countered. His fire arts are devastating. I heard he was personally guided by a golden immortal. Don't forget senior sister Luo Yu, a third chimed in. She's just as strong. Amidst the roar of the crowd, a few younger disciples whispered the name senior brother Yun, but their voices were quickly drowned out. A golden bell chimed, echoing across the peaks. 7 or 8 streaks of light descended from the sky, the sect elders. Among them was old man Fu Guang, Shuiyun's master. Another chime rang out. Participants, enter. 30 disciples leaped into the air, racing toward the center of the square. It was a circus of vanity. They weren't just moving, they were showing off. One bald youth walked through the air, and with every step, a golden lotus bloomed beneath his feet. Look, it's senior brother Fan Xian. So powerful, the crowd screamed. Another disciple, Xiao Yin, charged forward riding a literal dragon made of immortal flames, crashing through the air with sheer dominance. I watched them from the back, feeling a bit speechless. It was only a few hundred meters to the platforms. They acted like they had already won the lottery. I decided to give them something to really talk about. I let Shui Yun's blood-red energy explode outward. My silhouette became a streak of lightning. As I moved, I projected my voice, making it thunder across the entire square. Without madness, one cannot compete for the top. Without battle, one cannot conquer the world. In this generation, I am the peerless genius. My robes fluttered violently as I soared upward like a rising phoenix. Before anyone could react, I landed firmly on the highest, central platform, the spot reserved for the champion. The square went dead silent. The disciples who were mid-flight froze. The audience stared, mouths agape. Then, the outrage started. Are you kidding me? The match hasn't even started, and he's already camping the top spot. How arrogant. Does he want to be a target for all 29 other people? Even the disciples who originally supported Shui Yun lowered their heads in embarrassment. Up on the elders' bench, the leaders were stunned. Then, an elder named Qi Yong laughed. Without madness, one cannot compete for the top. I like it. This generation has spirit. He turned to my clones master. Fu Guang, isn't this bold kid your disciple? Old man Fu Guang stared at Shui Yun on the platform. I saw his face turn bright red. He looked away immediately, pretending to study a distant cloud. I don't know him, he muttered. Never seen him before in my life. I was never that cocky. I stood on the platform, looking down at everyone. I had shifted my primary consciousness into Shui Yun, but I kept his original consciousness active as a passenger so he could learn. Master, Shui Yun's consciousness whispered to me. Isn't this a bit too high profile? It's not very steady. What are you afraid of? I snapped back mentally. You're being high profile, not me. The more arrogant you are, the less anyone will link you to my real, low-key self. This is called hiding in plain sight. Shui Yun went quiet, seemingly enlightened. Master is wise. The referee looked conflicted, glancing at the elders for guidance. Usually, you wait for the bell to even approach the platforms. It doesn't break the rules, Elder Qiyong signaled. Start the match. The referee swung his golden hammer. Clang. Immediately, 29 disciples shot into the air. More than half of them ignored the other 2 platforms and came straight for me, their faces twisted with rage. I watched them swarm toward me like angry hornets. I let out a loud, booming laugh, my red hair flying in the wind. Are you all coming at me at once? Good. I, Shui Yun, fear no one. My blood-red energy surged, forming a violent vortex around the platform. Wait, I know him, someone in the crowd yelled. That's Shui Yun. He was the top seed of the 5th group. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The name Shui Yun started spreading, and the mockery turned into genuine anticipation. They wanted to see if I could actually back up my big mouth. Even a cave heaven immortal shouldn't be this arrogant. I could see the elders on the center stands looking at me with renewed interest. The disciples flying toward me suddenly slowed down. These people were the best of their groups. They had pride. Winning a group fight against one man wouldn't just be dishonorable. It would actually make my name more famous if I survived even a few seconds. A burly young man with short hair shouted from the crowd. His name was Duan Mingyuan, the leader of the 3rd group. He told the others to wait, claiming I was just a clown looking for attention because I knew I couldn't win. He stepped forward, eyes locked on mine. He told me the platform was too high for a newcomer like me and that I should get down before I fell. Before his voice even faded, he struck. A bronze scissor artifact in his hand erupted with immortal light. He swung it, creating hundreds of silhouettes that merged into one massive, sky-tearing blade. It crashed down toward me with the roar of thunder. He wasn't holding back. He wanted to end me in one hit. I sneered. I wasn't just talking big. I gripped my spear, feeling the power surge through Shui Yun's veins. I unleashed the 12th form of the dragon, Roar 13 Spears. Blood-red energy exploded like a tidal wave. A giant spider lily flower bloomed from my spear tip, clashing directly with the bronze scissors. The air screamed. The scissor silhouette held for only a second before my spear intent shredded it to pieces. The red energy didn't stop. It lunged toward Duan Mingyuan like a predator. He turned pale and retreated instantly, swinging his artifact a dozen times just to stabilize himself. He looked pathetic compared to my single, effortless thrust. The message was clear. I wasn't a clown. I was a threat. Duan Mingyuan knew it too. He didn't even try again, slinking off toward the lower platforms. Next, I called out, resting my spear on my shoulder. The remaining disciples hesitated. They realized I had mastered the 12th spear form, putting my strength in the top 5 of the entire group. In the world of void immortals, raw cultivation levels mattered less than the power of your divine arts. A woman stepped forward. Her name was Luo Yu. She moved with a graceful, ethereal air, surrounded by 6 colorful silk ribbons that floated like lotus petals. She didn't waste words. With a flick of her fingers, the ribbons expanded and shot toward me from 6 different angles. It looked like a soft attack, but my skin prickled with danger. Each ribbon felt like a separate immortal attacking with its own unique technique. This was the 7 Apertures' exquisite art. I swung my spear, but the ribbons were fluid and deceptive. Every time I struck, the force was absorbed and redirected. Within seconds, I was being pressed back, my movements becoming frantic. The crowd cheered. They wanted to see me humbled. Even the true immortals on the stands were nodding, commenting on how Luo Yu's soft style perfectly countered my aggressive spear. My supposed master, Fu Guang, was even muttering to himself, glad to see me finally learning that there was always someone better. I felt their eyes on me. I felt their judgment. It was time to stop holding back. I let out a low growl as red light erupted from my pores. A massive, blood-colored shadow materialized behind me, standing dozens of feet tall. It was a 3-faced, 6-armed demon god. The crowd went dead silent. Demon god's wrath. The phantom's 6 arms each gripped a blood-red spear. It lunged forward, intercepting the 6 ribbons simultaneously. With the phantom handling the defense, I finally had an opening. I lunged straight for Luo Yu, unleashing the yellow spring spear strike once again. Luo Yu's calm face shattered into panic. She had to recall her ribbons to defend herself, but it was too late. My demon phantom threw all 6 of its spears at her in a coordinated strike. I wasn't showing any mercy. The air turned cold. Luo Yu braced for a blow she knew she couldn't survive. Just as the spears were about to pierce her, a massive hand appeared out of thin air, crushing my energy attacks into dust. Elder Qi Yang had stepped in. He told Luo Yu to withdraw. She bowed to him, trembling, then gave me one last, deep look before flying off the platform. She was out. I stood alone at the top, my spear dripping with red light. The silence was deafening. Elder Qi Yang smiled at the young woman. He didn't want to hurt her. He just wanted her to give up the fight for the top spot. It was the price for his intervention. If she had stayed, my spears would have crippled her, and she wouldn't even have placed in the top 3. Luo Yu didn't just step down, though. She withdrew from the entire competition. I didn't really care. I wasn't there to kill people. I was there for the #1 rank. I activated my bloodthirsty talent, the red mist around me swirling as I greedily absorbed the surrounding essence to recover my strength. I stood tall, my spear gripped tight, the massive shadow of the demon god looming behind me like a nightmare. I looked at the few remaining contestants. Who's next? I shouted. My voice rolled across the plaza like thunder. I was just as arrogant as I had been at the start, but this time, nobody laughed. Arrogance is only a joke when you can't back it up. When you have the power to crush everyone in your path, people just call it the truth. Thousands of disciples stared at me in a heavy, suffocating silence. Up on the stands, my master, Fu Guang, was beaming. He laughed so hard his chest shook. "That's my disciple," he yelled at the other elders. "See that? He's just as legendary as I was back in the day." The other true immortals just looked away, pretending they couldn't hear him. I could see the regret in their eyes, though. They were kicking themselves for not snatching me up the moment I joined the sect. They had let Fu Guang walk away with the treasure. I turned my gaze toward the remaining challengers. Their faces went pale. One by one, they realized they didn't stand a chance. They turned around and scrambled toward the other two platforms, hoping to fight for second or third place. They wanted no part of me. Soon, only two people were left standing before my platform, Fan Xian and Xiao Yin. They looked conflicted. The strength I had just shown was terrifying. I was a cave heaven false immortal who had mastered the dragon roar spears and the demon god's wrath. On top of that, I hadn't even used my blood-slaying clan's berserk transformation yet. Fan Xian, the bald young man, looked particularly miserable. He couldn't wrap his head around how I had progressed so fast. Most people take decades to master those techniques. I had done it in a heartbeat. To him, it defied all logic. I guess that's just what being a genius feels like. He looked at me one last time, sighed, and pressed his palms together in a respectful bow. Then, he flew toward the second platform. "No way." Brother Fan Xian gave up. A disciple in the crowd screamed, looking like his world had ended. He had bet hundreds of thousands of spirit stones on Fan Xian taking first place. All around the plaza, I heard similar cries of agony. The gamblers were losing their minds. Then, all eyes turned to Xiao Yin. He was their last hope. "Brother Xiao Yin, stay strong. Knock him down. I put 30,000 on you," someone wailed. Xiao Yin hesitated for a moment, looked at the demon god behind me, and then he turned and left too. The crowd went silent for a heartbeat before erupting into a chorus of broken hearts. But amidst the misery, one man was grinning. Meng Hong, one of the bookmakers, was mentally counting his riches. He had organized this betting pool with some wealthy friends and even got a sect official to witness it for credibility. He had borrowed a massive amount of capital from his cousin, Su Qian, to set this up. "My intuition was right," Meng Hong whispered, his smirk widening. "I'm going to make tens of millions off this." Just then, a younger disciple ran up to him, sweating and panting. "Brother Meng, it's bad. We just finished the final audit of the books." Meng Hong frowned. "What are you panicking for? How bad can it be?" "We found a bet," the disciple gasped. "Someone put a massive amount on Lin Yuan to take first place." "So? One person can't bankrupt us," Meng Hong snapped. But his heart started to hammer against his ribs. "It was Lin Yuan himself," the disciple whispered, his voice trembling. "He bet 30 million low-grade spirit stones on his own victory." Meng Hong's face went white. The world started to spin. If I remembered correctly, my odds for winning were 10-1. That meant the payout was 300 million. Meng Hong's eyes rolled back into his head, and he collapsed in a dead faint. The house didn't just lose, it exploded. Up in the air, I felt the victory was sealed. I withdrew my consciousness from the clone, leaving it to enjoy the glory and the rewards on its own. I prefer to stay in the shadows. Back in my quiet courtyard in Music City, I sat dressed in simple green robes, holding a scroll of scripture. I looked like a refined scholar, a far cry from the blood-soaked demon who had just conquered the sect platform. No one would ever link the two of us together. I spent some time studying the Gungold Sword path, but then my thoughts drifted to my 3 fire clones over at the Sky Sword sect. I had been breaking through so quickly lately. I wondered how they were hiding their progress without a genius reputation to protect them. I shifted my consciousness into Hui Yuan, the clone who had stayed closest to the fairy, Mo Lin. Reading through his memories, I saw that the 3 of them had been playing the role of humble, hard-working servants. They had gained Mo Lin's trust, especially since the little beast, Xiao Bai, was so attached to them. When Mo Lin noticed their cultivation rising too fast, Hui Yuan had lied, telling her the 3 siblings shared a secret cultivation method that amplified their gains. I wasn't sure if she believed it, but she hadn't pushed the issue. In fact, they had become quite close. I even saw a memory of them bathing together. "Not bad," I muttered, pulling my consciousness back. Pretty scenic view. I told them to keep under cover. I wasn't giving up on the Chi Dragon bloodline. If I could get my hands on that, it would be my strongest transformation yet. Plus, the Chi Dragon was a water attribute creature, a perfect fit for what I was missing. Suddenly, another clone contacted me. Master, I found a massive opportunity. This was one of the 30 clones I had sent out into the world. I hadn't expected much from them so soon, but this one was millions of miles away. Master, the clone reported, I've joined a group of cultivators. They say there's an immortal mountain in the middle of the ocean filled with ancient treasures. I paused. That sounded like a classic trap. Was my clone about to get kidnapped and harvested for parts? Of course, I saw through such a clumsy trick immediately, the clone added, sounding a bit smug. I only have a fraction of your wisdom, Master. But even I knew it was a setup. But I followed them anyway. And you won't believe what I actually found. I chuckled. This clone had quite a personality. All right, I thought. Show me. I had been using my clones for a long time, and I finally understood how they worked. They were like independent living beings with their own wisdom and logic. If I didn't interfere, they could live their own lives entirely. But the highest law of their existence was unconditional obedience to me. The moment I stepped in, they became perfect tools, extensions of my own power and will. My clone was eager to tell me what he had found, so I let him speak. He told me that his group had used a teleportation array to reach what they thought was a fairy island. There were no treasures lying around. Instead, they had been captured. A powerful group was forcing them to dive into the ocean to find something called jellyfish dharma essence. I had never heard of it. My clone explained that he had asked the older cultivators on the island. This essence contained the very laws of the water element. It was a crucial material for refining heavy water pills and high-level water artifacts. It was incredibly rare. Master, I just found a piece, the clone said. Look. I checked the clone's storage space and saw a dark, blue-black crystal. With a thought, I pulled it into my own hand back at the courtyard. The moment I touched it, my eyes widened. It was only the size of an egg, but it weighed over 10,000 pounds. The air around me instantly turned damp, as if the atmosphere itself was about to condense into droplets. When I scanned it with my divine sense, I felt a concentrated ocean of power inside. This was high-grade stuff. Master, send the brothers, my clone urged. These waters are dangerous. If you're too late, I might be gone, and we'll lose this chance. I laughed. This clone was smart. He knew how to pitch an opportunity. I praised his initiative and immediately shifted my consciousness into his body. I opened my eyes and found myself deep underwater. The sea was a murky, dark green. Not far away sat a small island called Beefing Island. It was a lonely rock in a vast, endless ocean. The memories flooded in. 3 true immortals ruled this place, keeping the sea beasts at bay while forcing nearly 3,000 void immortals to act as water slaves. Most were level 5 or higher. Some were volunteers, but most were suckers like my clone who had been tricked. I was hundreds of meters down when a massive shadow flickered past. A giant sea beast lunged out of the darkness and swallowed a level 7 void immortal in a single gulp. I realized then why the clone was scared. That beast was at the 9th level of the void immortal realm. I quickly hid behind a jagged reef, holding my breath. I stayed perfectly still until the creature vanished back into the gloom. I understood why no one tried to escape. Between the predatory birds in the sky and the monsters in the deep, leaving the protection of the island was a death sentence. But I wasn't a normal slave. I summoned 99 more clones, bringing my total force in these waters to an even 100. I gave the order, and they split into teams of 3. They suppressed their auras and began scouring the seabed. I tried searching myself, but it was brutal. The water pressure in the immortal realm was terrifying. At my current level, I couldn't dive very deep. I was restricted to the shallow areas within a few hundred miles of the island. 2 hours passed. My 100 clones found nothing but a few low-level sea beasts. We killed them and took their cores, but it felt like a waste of time. I pulled my consciousness back to my main body, feeling frustrated. I ordered another clone, Lin Yuan 1, to find a treasure catalog from the local market. I needed to know exactly what I was looking at. I flipped through the pages until I found the entry for jellyfish dharma essence. The book confirmed everything my clone had said, but added one vital detail: the price. 1 pound of this stuff was worth at least 1,000 lower-grade immortal crystals. My heart skipped a beat. The egg-sized piece in my hand weighed 10,000 pounds. That meant this tiny rock was worth 10 million crystals. I didn't think it was a waste of time anymore. I immediately sent another 100 clones to join the underwater squad. When I was mining, a clone working 24 hours a day only brought in 60,000 crystals. If this team found just one piece of essence a day, the profit would be astronomical. If they hit a large vein, I'd be a billionaire overnight. I sat in my courtyard, doing the math in my head. I felt like a patriarch managing a massive family business. I needed a lot of resources to keep growing, and my mining operations were hitting roadblocks. This was the breakthrough I needed. My clones were essentially bait, but since they couldn't truly die, I was the only one who could turn this lethal trap into a gold mine. Anyone else would have been fed to the fish by now. Master, the rewards for the first place ranking are here. It was Shui Yun, another one of my clones. Lately, it felt like my luck was finally turning around. I tapped into his memory to see what we had won. First, I had full access to the 3rd floor of the Hidden Gold Pavilion to choose any complete manual. Second, the sect gave me 30,000 contribution points. Third, I received 3 Immortal Essence pills. But the best part was the hidden prize. Menghong's gambling den now owed me 300 million lower-grade immortal crystals from the bets I had placed. I looked at the list of gains and smiled. It was a good day to be me. I couldn't help but marvel at the sheer generosity of the Cloud Sea Immortal sect. The rewards for taking first place were staggering. Aside from the free choice of any manual, those 30,000 contribution points alone were enough to trade for several high-level immortal arts. Then there were the Immortal Essence pills. These weren't your typical cultivation boosters. They were designed to speed up a practitioner's ability to open their immortal apertures. For anyone else, these pills would be the crown jewels of the reward, saving them decades of bitter cultivation. But for me, they were just okay. My cultivation speed was already breakneck, so these would only save me a few days at best. I figured I'd just use them as a cover story to explain why I was leveling up so fast. I took the pills out, looked at them for a moment, and tucked them away. While the manuals my clone, Shui Yun, had grabbed before were mostly from the first 2 floors of the pavilion, the 3rd floor held the real treasures. I planned to go there myself soon. However, I had a more pressing matter. I had Shui Yun use some points to immediately exchange for a water-based immortal art. I needed it for one reason: to make my underwater treasure hunting squad more efficient. Soon, the manual was in my hands. It was called the Azure Jade Water Manual, a law-grade immortal art. These kinds of techniques were usually reserved for true immortals or golden immortals because they dealt with the fundamental laws of the universe. I flipped through it, feeling the profound complexity of the text, and then I did what I always do. I dumped the problem onto my 5,000 clones currently in training. An hour later, I hit a snag. Usually, my clones mastered things instantly, but this time, the progress was incredibly slow. Even with 5,000 of them working together, an hour of synchronized cultivation had barely gotten them past the doorstep. They only had a faint feeling for the technique. I sat back and analyzed why. My previous successes were with arts involving soul power or specific combat skills, like the Dragon Roar spears. Or, they were areas where my specific clones had a natural talent, like my Wolf Clan clones mastering wind movement. But right now, neither my main body nor any of my clones had a natural affinity for water. My human clones were struggling, and my specialized beast clones were completely clueless. It was frustrating. I was a man whose path had always been as fierce as a dragon and as fast as the wind. Now, faced with a water technique, I was suddenly failing? I couldn't accept that. Then, I remembered the jellyfish Dharma scripture I'd found underwater. I pulled the glowing rock out and tossed it into the system's cultivation space. I commanded my 5,000 clones to sit in a circle around it and begin again. As my clones pushed their immortal energy into the stone, the vast water energy stored inside the scripture began to radiate outward. A thick mist filled the space. The environment became saturated with water elements. Suddenly, the clones who were previously water-blind started to catch on. The mist acted like a catalyst, opening their minds to the element. I could feel the speed of their comprehension multiplying. By the time I opened my eyes a day later, I was beaming. Water vapor swirled around me, and blue light pulsed from my skin. I pointed a finger at the air in my courtyard. Without using a drop of forced immortal energy, the moisture in the air condensed into a thick, gentle rain. To any outsider, I would have looked like a high-level water immortal. Finally, some progress. I laughed, waving my hand to make the rain and even the puddles on the ground vanish instantly. The results were great, but the cost was heavy. In just one day, that 10 million crystal piece of jellyfish scripture had been sucked dry and turned to dust. If only I could get my hands on a dragon-type bloodline, I muttered to myself. If I could create a dragon clone, I wouldn't have to jump through all these hoops to master water. I thought about that little fat dragon, Xiaobai, back at the sect. I honestly felt like kidnapping him just to drain some blood. The little brat had been eating my clone's essence and lounging around my fire element clones for days. If it weren't for his master, the true immortal Mo Lin, I might have actually tried it. I had my lead clone, Fangyu No. 1, scouting the markets and auctions for high-quality bloodlines, but they were hard to find. I was picky. I wouldn't waste a clone slot on a weak race. Once a clone was assigned a race, it was permanent. Weakness didn't fit my style. I shifted my consciousness into one of my clones at Shelter Island, Fang Shui. As I entered the water, the difference was night and day. Before, I had to use brute force to fight the ocean pressure. Now, the water embraced me. I felt as agile as a fish. The surrounding water elements were so rich I almost wanted to stay down there and meditate. I tested my limits and found that my diving depth and search range had doubled. My senses were sharper, making it much easier to spot the glow of the scriptures. The investment had paid off. Back in Silver Moon City, I checked my inventory. My 2 underwater squads had found 2 more pieces of the jellyfish scripture. One was the size of an egg, the other slightly smaller. Together, they were worth about 20 million crystals. They'd also found several water element beast cores, which were worth a few 100,000 more. The next day was even better. They brought back 5 pieces of the scripture, worth nearly 70 million crystals. Since I wasn't short on cash, I decided to keep them for cultivation rather than selling them. Of course, it wasn't all easy profit. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. I lost 7 or 8 clones to sea monsters and underwater hazards over those 2 days. But since they just respawned in my system, I sent replacements immediately, keeping the search party at a steady 400. I was tempted to send more, but I needed to keep the rest focused on cultivation. Meanwhile, back at the medium-sized crystal mine, I knew the true immortal Ling Yun was still waiting. She had set a massive trap, her divine sense sweeping the area constantly, waiting for me to show my face again. She had no idea I was miles away, getting rich under the sea. Ling Yun, that true immortal, was a persistent one. She'd spent the last few weeks summarizing every possible way to catch me, convinced that if my black shadow appeared again, she'd have me trapped for good. Her divine sense swept the crystal mine constantly, day and night, like a relentless radar. But 10 days passed. Then 20. I never showed up. The constant high alert started to wear them down. Ling Yun and her law enforcement team were exhausted, their nerves frayed from chasing a ghost. Even their spirit-seeking mice had grown thin from the stress. I couldn't help but smirk. They wanted to catch me? In their dreams. Back in Silver Moon City, I was living the good life. I leaned back in my grand chair, completely relaxed. The sisters, Jian Wu and Jian Ro, stood by my side, peeling fresh, juicy grapes and popping them into my mouth. I wasn't worried about the mine anymore. My clone, Shui Yun, was my eyes and ears inside the Yunfan immortal sect. Her master, perfected Fu Guang, was a bit of a chatterbox. He'd let slip a few details about the mine's security, and Shui Yun had immediately reported back to me. Since I wasn't short on immortal crystals, I decided to play it safe. There was no point in taking unnecessary risks when I was already rich. If I needed more resources after reaching the true immortal realm, I'd go back. But for now, I was content to let them guard an empty hole. One afternoon, perfected Fu Guang called Shui Yun to his private hall. "Yunner," he said, his voice grave. "In 5 days, the Void Immortal level Lingguang's secret realm will open. You're new, so I'll explain the situation. Then, you can decide if you want to go." As he spoke, my interest peaked. The secret realm was actually a fragment of an ancient continent from the primordial immortal realm. It was filled with rare spirit herbs, ancient ruins, and even law Dao pills. But what really caught my attention was the mention of ancient beast bloodlines. Fu Guang saw the look in Shui Yun's eyes and knew she was going. He didn't try to stop her. In the immortal world, danger was everywhere, and only those who dared to move forward would reach the top. He himself had gained his light law from a chance encounter in a secret realm years ago. It's not just the three sects going, he warned. Disciples from neighboring domains, and even the immortal lord's palace will be there. The environment is dangerous, but the other cultivators are the real threat. You aren't the strongest, so stay close to your senior brothers. Just grab what you can and focus on staying alive. Shui Yun bowed and left, reporting everything to me the moment she hit her quarters. My mind raced as I processed her memories. An ancient continent fragment, law pills, ancient bloodlines. I wanted in. These kinds of opportunities were usually hogged by the big sects. If I hadn't planted a clone inside, I wouldn't have even known it existed. The realm was restricted to anyone below the true immortal stage. That meant the competition would be fierce, mostly void immortals at the peak of their power. I hit a realization. Fu Guang said the realm was in a different spatial dimension. I wasn't sure if I could still summon my clone army once Shui Yun crossed over. Space was a tricky thing. If the summoning worked, Shui Yun would be a one-woman army of 10,000. Even a peak void immortal would tremble before those numbers. I could imagine the scene. 10,000 of me surrounding a group of geniuses, shouting, "Drop the loot, and nobody gets hurt." But if it didn't work? Shui Yun was only at the 6th level of the void immortal realm. She'd be a small fish in a very big pond. It all depended on whose rules were stronger, the secret realm space or my system space. I had 5 days. I needed to power up. I sent Shui Yun to the sect's scripture pavilion. She still had one free choice of a high-level immortal technique from her previous tournament win. The elder guarding the pavilion was a white-haired man with a surprisingly young face. He wore purple robes and felt completely ordinary, but my system gave me a sharp warning. He was a true immortal at peak completion. When he opened his eyes, I felt a shiver run down my spine. His gaze felt like a physical probe, stripping away my secrets and looking right through me. I kept my face calm, but my heart was pounding. "3rd floor," he said tonelessly. "You have 1 hour." With a flick of his whisk, the restriction on the stairs vanished. I hurried up. The 3rd floor held the law-grade techniques. There weren't many, maybe 100, but each one glowed with its own unique intent, floating in the air like colorful stars. I was spoiled for choice. I spent 30 minutes scanning them. I narrowed it down to 3, a gold attribute offensive spell for my main body, a blood-based technique perfect for Shui Yun's lineage, and a soul cultivation manual. The soul manual was the most tempting. I didn't have any specialized ways to train my spirit yet, and even though it wasn't a law technique, its placement on the 3rd floor proved its value. I kept looking, wanting to be sure. Most of the techniques were based on the 5 elements. Rare attributes were hard to find. Just as my time was running out, I spotted something in a dusty corner. It was a faint, flickering white light, so dim it was almost invisible. Compared to the other floating orbs of light, this one was incredibly easy to miss. I almost walked right past it. The light it emitted was dim, flickering like a dying candle, looking even weaker than the techniques on the 2nd floor. I was curious. I sent my divine sense into the glow. My pupils shrank instantly. The Wuxiang Void Scripture. It was a space attribute law technique. Just reading those first few words sent a tidal wave of shock through my mind. I couldn't believe it. The Yunfan Immortal Sect was powerful, sure, but not legendary. As far as I knew, their strongest cultivators were only 2 golden immortals. How could a sect like this possess a technique involving the laws of space? I didn't know the exact hierarchy of laws in the immortal realm yet, but I knew enough to realize that time and space were at the absolute top. They were the peak of power. Excitement surged through me. I kept reading, but as I went further, the smile on my face stiffened. At the very end of the introduction, there was a line of small text. Asterisk recovered from a secret realm 10,000 years ago by a disciple. The manual is incomplete. To this day, no one has been able to comprehend it. Choose carefully, asterisk. Time is up, little fellow. Have you chosen? The elder's voice pulled me back. I quickly exited the third floor and stood before him. I choose the Wuxiang Void Scripture, I said firmly. The purple-robed Taoist looked at me, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He had heard of me. As Shui Yun, I had a reputation for being arrogant, confident, and incredibly talented. Are you sure you want this one? He asked. Is it not allowed? I raised an eyebrow. It is allowed, he replied. But did you not read the description? The manual is broken. It only contains the middle section. The beginning is missing entirely. Do you really think you can cultivate it? Little fellow, do not let your ambition cloud your judgment. This is a rare opportunity. I suggest you pick something else. Thank you for the advice, elder, but I've made my choice, I said. My mind was made up. Space attribute techniques were things you found once in a lifetime if you were lucky. I could find substitutes for anything else, but this? Even if it was broken, I couldn't let it go. The elder let out a soft chuckle. Confident and arrogant, just as they say. He looked at me one last time, but didn't push further. In his thousands of years, he had seen plenty of young geniuses who thought they were special. Most of them were just full of themselves. He flipped his palm, revealing a golden circular box covered in intricate runes. It pulsed with a faint golden light. He formed a hand seal, fueling the box with immortal energy. The box shot upward, hovering over the orb containing the Wuxiang Void Scripture. A beam of light sucked the orb's essence into the box. The runes on the box flared brilliantly for nearly a minute before the light finally dimmed. The box flew back into the elder's hand. He opened the lid and shook it slightly. A jade slip fell out. I watched closely, realizing how it worked. The box acted like a high-tech copier. It imprinted the contents and a portion of the Tao rhyme from the original orb onto the slip without damaging the source. It was so secure that even the elder couldn't see what was inside. The slip has a restriction, he warned, tossing it to me. Only you can view the contents. Do not try to copy it or spread the text. If you do, the consequences will be yours to bear. I understand, I said, catching the slip and bowing. As I stepped out of the scripture pavilion, a familiar figure landed in front of me. It was Luo Yu, the girl I had nearly seriously injured during the tournament. She looked surprised to see me. Her eyes lingered on mine for a moment before she gave a small, respectful nod. I nodded back and kept moving. I had the technique. Now, I needed to collect my debt. Meng Hong and his crew still owed me 300 million immortal crystals. Back at their cave dwelling, Meng Hong and his 4 friends were in a state of total collapse. They had spent the last few days crunching the numbers. Without my bet, they would have walked away with a 60 million crystal profit. But my win had shattered their bank. I calculated it again, Zhaojin said, his face pale as he looked at the ledger. If we pool everything, our crystals, our pills, our sect contribution points, we only have 130 million. We can't pay him. The others didn't even react. They already knew they were broke. I don't get it, Chi Chong growled, gesturing aggressively. Where did a guy like Shui Yun get that much money to bet? There's something fishy going on. Maybe we should threaten him? Or just find an opening and take him out. He made a cutting motion across his throat. Are you an idiot? Zhaojin snapped. Threaten him? He's a genius, and his master is Fu Guang, a true immortal. You want to die? Chi Chong, drop the dangerous talk, Luo Bufan warned. Right now, we just owe money. We're still alive. I was just suggesting it, Chi Chong muttered. He turned to Luo Bufan. Hey, Bufan, your sister Luo Yu is a famous beauty. Everyone wants her. Why don't you introduce her to Shui Yun? If they become family, the debt goes away, right? Get lost, Luo Bufan roared. In the Luo family, his sister had way more status than he did. If he tried to sell her off to cover a gambling debt, his ancestors would beat him to death. Meng Hong, Zhaojin said, turning to the leader. Don't you have a cousin who's a high-ranking member of the Wanbao Immortal Association? Go talk to him. I tried, Meng Hong said, his voice dripping with misery. The moment I mentioned the money, he pretended he didn't know me. He even asked me to pay back the money I already owed him. That bastard. I used to help him get stuff all the time. Tang Huan, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. Should we ask our families for the money? The other 4 immediately glared at him. No, they shouted in unison. Their families were wealthy, but they had played way too large this time. The debt was astronomical. If their parents found out they had lost this much gambling, they'd be skinned alive. Suddenly, a voice drifted into the cave from outside. Is senior brother Meng in? Shui Yun is here to visit. The five of them froze. Their bodies actually started to tremble. If they could go back in time, they would never have opened that betting pool. After a long, agonizing silence, the cave door slowly creaked open. The moment they saw me, all five of them dropped to their knees. What is this? I asked, frowning. These guys weren't nobodies. They were veteran disciples from powerful backgrounds, 2 at the 7th level of Void Immortal and 3 at the 8th. They were the ultimate immortal second-generation clique. And yet, here they were, weeping at my feet. As they started blubbering about their financial ruin, my face darkened. I kicked Luo Buffon, who was currently hugging my leg. You're trying to stiff me? I sneered. Let me tell you something. That 30 million I bet. I borrowed that from my master. If you don't pay up, do you want me to bring a true immortal here to collect? They shivered violently. The rumors about Fuguang true immortal doting on me were clearly true in their minds. No, absolutely not. Zhaozhen stammered. We don't have it all right now. Please, senior brother, give us some time. We don't want this to get out. He frantically handed over his storage bag. Here is 130 million crystals. Take this first. It's a down payment. Luo Buffon nodded quickly. The rest, we'll get it. We promise. We definitely won't miss a day of repayment, Luo Buffon stammered, his forehead touching the cold ground. From now on, senior brother Shui Yun, you are our big brother. We can swear an oath to the heavens. He gestured wildly to the other 4. Quick, greet our big brother. Luo Buffon bowed again, lower this time, and the other 4 followed suit like a row of falling dominoes. They were desperate. Each of them owed tens of millions of crystals, and they had already emptied their pockets just to make the down payment. They had no idea when they could pay the rest, so they chose the only path left, submission. I looked down at them and frowned. To be honest, I thought they were pathetic. 300 million crystals was a massive sum to them, but to me, it was just the cost of doing business. I let out a sharp, cold snort. These immortal second-generation types were useless, but having 5 well-connected lackeys wasn't the worst thing in the world. I knew they weren't being sincere. They were just trying to stall for time. I didn't care. As long as they were useful later, I'd let them play their little game. A short while later, I left the cave and headed back into Moon City. I had 130 million crystals in my pocket and 5 new followers I didn't really want. Once I was settled, I pulled out the Wuxiang Xian Kong Jing. The library elder hadn't been lying. The jade slip was bound to the bloodline and destiny of my clone, Shui Yun. No one else could even peek at the contents. I shifted my consciousness, entering Shui Yun's body fully, and sank my mind into the slip. This time, the information flowed perfectly, but as I studied the text, my heart sank. The scripture was broken. It felt like the most important parts, the foundation and the direction, were missing. No matter how much I meditated, I couldn't find the path to actually practice it. But I wasn't like other cultivators. I had an army. I copied the unique intent and the fragmented laws from the Jade Slip and shared them with all 9,000 of my clones. Suddenly, thousands of versions of me were contemplating the same mystery at once. My comprehension speed didn't just double, it exploded. The world around me began to blur. My consciousness drifted, falling away from the physical world. Suddenly, I was standing in a place with no top, no bottom, no left, and no right. It was a vast, gray emptiness. I was lost in an infinite void. I snapped awake, my heart racing. Cold sweat matted my hair. My eyes were wide with a mix of fear and wonder. What was that place? I tried to dive back in, but the void was gone. I pushed my clones harder, forcing them to synchronize their thoughts. After hours of mental strain, the sensation returned. I was back in the void. I felt like the only living thing in existence. There was nothing to touch, nothing to see, and no direction to follow. I felt small. I felt insignificant. It was a crushing loneliness that made me feel like a speck of dust in an endless storm. When I finally pulled myself out of it, I felt hollow. The silence of the void stayed with me, making the real world feel fake. I had to summon my maidservants, Jian Wu and Jian Ro, along with a few others, just to feel the warmth of living beings again. The feeling of being alive slowly returned, but the lesson remained. The law of space was one of the highest powers in existence. It was terrifying. The scripture was definitely incomplete. Even with a 5,000-fold boost to my comprehension, I could only grasp the intent, not the technique. I couldn't cultivate it yet, but I didn't regret the purchase. A law like this was priceless. I'd keep it for later. I turned my attention inward. My 12 immortal apertures for the 6th level were fully open. My foundation was rock solid. All 36 apertures connected to my middle dantian were vibrating with energy. Time to break through, I whispered. Inside my system space, 9,000 clones sat in a massive circle. On my command, they all began to cultivate at once. The surge of energy was like a tidal wave. My middle dantian glowed, and the 36 apertures lit up like a constellation of stars. I wasn't just aiming for the 7th level. I was pushing for something much rarer. As the energy reached a boiling point, I heard a sound like rolling thunder inside my chest. The 36 apertures didn't just open, they began to melt together. They were merging, forming a new space. I realized what was happening. My breakthrough was so violent, so powerful, that it was forcing the creation of a second grotto heaven. I grinned, feeling like the commander of a vast legion. Keep pushing. The difficulty was insane. The bottleneck felt like a wall of reinforced steel. My first grotto heaven in my lower dantian began to glow, reacting to the birth of its twin. The two spaces seemed to pull at each other, creating a chaotic friction that threatened to tear me apart. Now I understood why grotto heaven cultivators were so rare. Even with my massive advantages, this was incredibly hard. Most geniuses were lucky to form one. Those who could form two were the elite disciples of the greatest sects in the immortal world. And three was the stuff of legends. A cultivator with 3 grotto heavens was a monster. If they didn't die young, they were guaranteed to become golden immortals at the very least. Their foundation was so deep that their power as a true immortal would be leagues beyond their peers. Of course, there was a trade-off. It took a massive amount of time and resources. A normal person could reach the true immortal stage in the time it took a genius to build 3 grotto heavens. To many, it seemed like a waste. Why stay a weak void immortal for 100 years just to have a better foundation, when you could just become a true immortal and crush everyone anyway? But they were wrong. The difference in life level was real, but so was the potential. If I could build this foundation now, I wouldn't just be a true immortal later. I would be a god among them. And with my clones, I didn't have to worry about the time. I was going to have it all. I was pushing forward with everything I had. I refused to stop until I smashed through that invisible wall. The pressure was immense, but I didn't back down. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. Above the clouds of the Yunfan immortal sect, a massive immortal ship floated silently. It was a holy sight, bathed in the glow of the morning sun. Led by the golden immortal, old man Yinyun, and dozens of true immortal elders, 100 void immortal disciples were preparing to depart. We were heading to the Lingguang's secret realm for a trial that only happened once in a long while. The giant ship roared through the sky like a prehistoric beast. As it soared, it parted the clouds and left a trail of awe in its wake. Down below, rogue cultivators looked up with envy and fear. I could hear their whispers drifting on the wind. They talked about how the Yunfan immortal sect had suffered a massive blow during the last secret realm trial, losing more than half of their genius disciples. They wondered if we could turn things around this time. The ship was a masterpiece, a floating palace covered in glowing runes and protective arrays. It had 3 levels, each filled with private cultivation rooms. On the broad deck at the front, dozens of ambitious void immortals stood tall. Most were at the 8th or 9th level, the absolute cream of the crop for this generation. They were proud, their eyes filled with dreams of glory. Among them stood a handsome young man who looked a bit out of place. His cultivation was only at the 7th level of the void immortal stage, making him one of the weakest people on the deck. But nobody dared to look down on him. His name was Xiao Yin, and he was a genius from the Xiao family. In our sect, the Xiao family held supreme status, boasting several true immortal elders and the backing of the golden immortal, Yin Yun. Xiaoyan was looking around restlessly. A disciple next to him noticed and smiled. Junior brother Xiaoyan, what are you looking for? I'm looking for that guy, Shui Yun, Xiaoyan replied, his voice dripping with confidence. He wore a white robe embroidered with flame patterns. After the recent disciple competition, he had used his rewards to break through to the 7th level. Not only had he mastered a powerful fire-type immortal art, but his elders had also gifted him a low-grade immortal treasure for protection. He was itching for a fight. He wanted to crush me and take back the spotlight I had stolen from him. Shui Yun, the guy who took first place in the mid-stage competition? The disciple asked. Xiaoyan's face darkened immediately. The words first place stung like a slap to his face. He had bragged to his elders that he would dominate everyone and take the top spot. He had managed to suppress Fan Xian, but he had failed to beat me. Even though his elders praised him for being rational and not pushing his luck after getting injured, he still felt like a failure. Seeing his expression, the other disciple quickly tried to suck up to him. Don't worry about him, junior brother. He just has a bit of talent. But in the path of cultivation, talent isn't everything. You need background and resources. Xiaoyan didn't even let him finish. He shot the guy a cold look, snorted, and walked away. The disciple stood there, confused. He thought he was stating the obvious truth of the immortal world: wealth, companions, techniques, and land. In his mind, I only had a bit of talent, while Xiaoyan had everything else. Suddenly, a brilliant light erupted from one of the rooms on the ship. The radiance was so intense that the walls couldn't contain it. Immortal music echoed through the air, vibrating in everyone's soul. Every person on the deck turned their heads in shock. A figure shot up into the sky, sitting cross-legged just beneath the ship's protective barrier. The figure began to greedily absorb the surrounding immortal energy, sending out waves of dazzling light. It was my clone, Shui Yun. I had decided that if I was going to be high-profile, I might as well go all the way. Shui Yun? He's breaking through. Near the edge of the deck, a beautiful young woman named Luo Yu stared up at me, her eyes shimmering with interest. Xiaoyan's fists clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. He watched me with pure hatred. That damn guy. It's just a breakthrough. Why does he have to make such a scene? But a second later, his jaw dropped. His eyes filled with disbelief. In the sky, the light around me pulsed violently. From my lower and middle Dantian regions, 2 glowing projections of grotto heavens emerged. They were vast, mysterious, and blindingly bright. Grotto heavens. And there are 2 of them, someone screamed. He's a 2-grotto void immortal. The entire ship went into an uproar. Even the golden immortal, Yin Yun, looked out from his private chamber with narrowed eyes. The sect was divided into 3 main factions: the Fan family, the Shao family, and the sect master's lineage. My master, true immortal Fu Guang, belonged to the Fan faction. Seeing a talent like me emerge from a rival group clearly made Yin Yun uneasy. The true immortals on board appeared one by one, staring at me with expressions ranging from hunger to hidden jealousy. My master, Fu Guang, was beaming with joy. He stepped forward and stood in front of me just as I finished my breakthrough. He tried to act stern, glaring at me. It's just the 7th level. Even if you opened 2 grotto heavens, did you have to make such a mess? You're nothing like me. You need to learn some humility. Despite his words, he was looking at the other elders with a smug grin that he couldn't quite hide. I understand, master, I said, scratching my head sheepishly. I just didn't expect that opening a 2nd grotto heaven would cause such a disturbance. I'm sorry. Fu Guang's eye twitched. He wasn't sure if I was being serious or just showing off. He had never opened a 2nd grotto heaven himself, so he didn't actually know what the process looked like. Several true immortals stepped forward to congratulate him, offering hollow words of praise while looking at me with complicated eyes. The other disciples were drowning in envy. Xiaoyan, however, suddenly stiffened as a secret voice transmission reached his ears. A cold, cruel smile spread across his face. Shui Yun, he whispered to himself, you're dead. My master looked at me, his pride turning into genuine concern. Yunner, maybe you shouldn't go to the secret realm this time. Your talent is too great. I don't think you should take this risk, Master Fu Guang said, his voice heavy with genuine concern. He meant every word. I looked him in the eye. Master, I understand your kindness. But you told me once that a cultivator's path is an uphill battle against the heavens themselves. How can I retreat just because there's danger? If I do, even with my talent, others will eventually catch me. I'll be surpassed. I spoke with a sharp, determined edge. Retreat? Not a chance. I wasn't just going to that secret realm. I was bringing 10,000 of my brothers with me to loot the entire place and cut down anyone who stood in our way. Meanwhile, back in Moon City, my main body felt a surge of power. The little fairy, Lin, had finally left. I checked my internal state and felt a wave of satisfaction. A second grotto heaven within the void immortal realm? It was exactly as impressive as it sounded. I stood in my courtyard, looking up at the sky at a 45-degree angle. I felt like an ancient pine standing on a peak, or a fallen immortal gazing at the clouds. I looked calm and lonely, like I might drift away on the wind at any second. But inside, I was grinning like an idiot. I couldn't stop the smug smirk from creeping onto my face. I'd been watching the situation with my clone, Shui Yun. The commotion he caused with his breakthrough was enough to make anyone jealous. But it didn't faze me. Why? Because a genius at that level could only hold out for 5 days against a flood of 10,000 of my clones. I threw a punch into the air. The void boomed. Gung Gold sword intent shot out like golden threads, vanishing in an instant. My immortal power had transformed. If it was a stream before, it was a roaring river now. Then, I discovered something even better. My two grotto heavens could balance each other out. By doing this, I could hide them completely, making me look like a regular void immortal with 72 immortal apertures. If I stopped the balance, they'd snap right back. This was a huge relief. I'd been worried about being too extraordinary. I have 10,000 clones. Most are training in the system space, but hundreds are out wandering. If people noticed a huge cluster of geniuses with multiple grotto heavens in one small area, I'd be in deep trouble. Aside from the arrogant Shui Yun, I ordered all my other clones to hide their true power. Stay low. If anything fell off, they were to self-destruct and respawn rather than bring trouble to the rest of the family. I checked on my other teams. My underwater squad, led by Fong Shui, had been busy. Over the last 5 days, they'd found 30 pieces of jellyfish hair crystal. Most were the size of eggs, but one was the size of a bowl. It weighed over 70,000 pounds. The water element energy inside was as vast as a green lake. That single piece was worth at least 100 million low-grade immortal crystals. It was a treasure for understanding water laws. My eyes lit up. This trip was becoming more profitable by the second. I replenished the clones I'd lost and told them to keep searching. While I kept one eye on Shui Yun, I decided to train my Dao heart. My method was simple and a bit crude. I had several beautiful succubus demons use their charm powers on me all at once. It was purely for mental discipline, of course. Suddenly, a voice reached my ears. Master. My face flushed a bit more, but I quickly shifted my consciousness into my fire source clone. I realized the opportunity had arrived. Lin had gone to the secret realm, leaving her immortal palace empty. Only a few maidservants were guarding the outside, and they were weak. Because my fire source clone was close with Lin, I could move through the palace without suspicion. I walked into the depths of the palace, holding the chubby white dragon, Qi Long, in my arms. Everything looked normal, but a cold, meaningful smile played on my lips. The little dragon seemed to sense something. He lifted his head and looked around, confused. He saw me smiling sweetly at him, chirped happily, and buried his head deeper into my arms to go back to sleep. I felt a flash of disgust. This little fatty was taking advantage of my clone. I'd make him regret that in a minute. I reached a private room and waved my hand, setting up a concealment array. 2 figures appeared beside me, my succubus sisters, one mature and one petite. This little pervert should love this, I whispered. The dragon was only at the 6th level of the void immortal realm. My clones were at the 7th. With the succubi using their innate charms, it was a total mismatch. I slapped the dragon's head to wake him up. He jolted awake, only to stare straight into 2 pairs of glowing purple eyes. Qilong fell into a dream immediately. He was probably dreaming of 1,000 female dragons and a paradise of luxury. He started drooling, his little body twitching in excitement. They say dragons are naturally lecherous, and they weren't lying. Compared to my disciplined Dao heart, this guy was pathetic. I pulled out a dagger and started draining his blood. He felt the sting, but in his dream, he just thought a female dragon was getting playful. He didn't even wake up. In fact, he got more excited, making the blood flow even faster. Meanwhile, millions of miles away in a massive canyon, the flags of 3 great sects fluttered in the wind: the Yunfan sect, the Heavenly Sword sect, and the Jinhan Immortal Palace. The entrance to the secret realm was about to open. More than a dozen other immortal sects arrived, each led by a powerful golden immortal. They hovered in the air, their bodies radiating brilliant light, as if they were competing to see who could shine the brightest. Thousands of immortals filled the sky, their collective aura stretching across tens of thousands of miles. It was an arrogant, dazzling display of power. The Lingguang's secret realm existed in a separate dimension. Every so often, it aligned with the main plane of the immortal world. It was a prime training ground within the territory of the Thousand-Eye Immortal King. Even though its location shifted, the top-level experts could always calculate its coordinates. This time, they found 3 entrances. The one before me was just one of them. Technically, everyone here served the same immortal king. But we belonged to different lords, and the competition was fierce. These trials were about more than just finding treasures. They were a way for the sects to measure their strength. The rules were simple. Everyone sent in a similar number of disciples. If your people got wiped out, you didn't get to complain. It was a silent agreement between the lords. The performance of the disciples even determined how resources were distributed later. The Golden Immortals were busy trading insults and making bets. I didn't care about their posturing. I was currently controlling my clone, Shui Yun. While the big shots talked, I scanned the crowd. I looked at the disciples from other sects, especially the powerful non-human races who appeared in their true forms. I made mental notes of a few sisters I spotted. If I ran into them inside, I wouldn't hesitate to take their essence and blood. I couldn't help but let out a wicked grin. Junior brother, our master gave us orders. My eldest senior brother, Chaoong, said beside me. Once we enter, stay close to us. Don't go running off. He's right. My second senior sister, Xiaoyu added. She gave me a playful, lingering look. Master said if you don't come back, the 3 of us don't need to bother coming back either. You better stick to me, okay? Don't leave my side. She leaned in, showing off her curves. I was a talented newcomer with a bright future, and she wasn't hiding her interest. She looked at my red hair and handsome face, her heart beating a little faster. She probably remembered I was from the Bloodfiend tribe. Rumor had it my kind had 5 kidneys. Her face flushed a faint shade of red just thinking about it. Suddenly, the space above the canyon began to ripple like water. Everyone turned to look. Master, the secret realm is opening, Shui Yun reported to my main body. Back at the Heavenly Sword sect, I had already filled 2 large tubs with blood from the little dragon, Xiaobai. On the surface, the tubs looked bigger than the dragon itself, but that was just because he was currently in a miniaturized form. In reality, he was huge. Now his chubby little body had shrunken considerably. His scales were dull. He looked completely drained, like he'd spent a month in a brothel. I heard the report and smiled. I had more than enough dragon blood now. I pulled out some healing medicine and sprinkled it on his wounds. The cuts vanished instantly. If it weren't for his pale, exhausted look, you'd never know I'd touched him. I thought for a moment, then poured a puddle of his own frothy drool under his belly. I dismissed my succubus clones. Then, I used a chain of other clones, Fire Spirit and Fire Fong, to relay my consciousness back and forth, safely withdrawing my presence from the area. It was a perfect getaway. I shifted my full attention back to Shui Yun at the canyon. Back in the sect's hall, the nightmare ended. Xiaobai slowly opened his eyes. He felt a wave of extreme weakness. He felt something wet under him and jumped into the air, startled. He looked down, and his eyes nearly popped out of his head. He let out a series of embarrassed, incoherent whimpers. He actually thought he'd had a dream so intense it left him physically withered. He felt like he'd lost all his dignity as a dragon. At the canyon, the sky began to shake violently. It sounded like 2 invisible beasts were tearing at each other. With a loud crack, a massive, jagged hole ripped open in the air. Disciples, enter, a golden immortal shouted. A dozen experts moved at once, using their laws to stabilize the collapsing entrance. Thousands of disciples surged forward. I moved with my senior siblings, charging toward the rift. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt a faint, almost imperceptible force nudge my body. The world blurred. When my vision cleared, my face went dark. I was standing in a vast, endless desert. Sandstorms whipped around me, obscuring the horizon. My senior siblings were nowhere to be seen. Instead, I saw Xiao Yin and a few other members of the Xiao family standing nearby. Usually, people who entered together landed in the same spot. The fact that I was alone meant that nudge had been intentional. Someone had sabotaged my entry. I looked around and saw Luo Yu nearby, surrounded by her own protectors. They were all on high guard. I was the only one who had been separated from my group. Damn it, I hissed under my breath. I closed my eyes and reached out with my mind, trying to summon my other clones. I needed to be sure. I summoned 1,000 clones instantly and scattered them in every direction. This was my insurance policy. As long as one clone survived, I could always manifest more and stay in the game. If I lost my main vessel here, this secret realm journey would be over before it even started. As soon as my clones were deployed, Xiao Yin and his group strolled over. They had smug grins on their faces. Xiao Yin looked at me and laughed, mocking the fact that I was standing all alone. He told me it wasn't safe and suggested I walk with them. His men quickly fanned out, subtly surrounding me. The other cultivators nearby just watched with cold indifference. I looked at Xiao Yin with pure disdain. If there weren't so many witnesses around, I would have used my clones to end his life right there. Suddenly, a crisp voice rang out. It was Luo Yu. She told Xiao Yin that we were all from the same sect and should be helping each other. Xiao Yin stopped in his tracks and frowned. He tried to play it off, claiming he was just worried about me being solo. Luo Yu didn't believe a word of it. She walked straight up to me and invited me to join her group instead. I was genuinely surprised. I didn't have much of a history with this woman. In fact, the last time we met, I'd nearly crippled her in a duel without showing a hint of mercy. Why was she helping me now? Before I could answer, my gut twisted. A sharp sense of danger flared in my mind. My spiritual perception was far beyond a normal cultivator, and I felt something massive moving beneath us. Several powerful life forces were surging through the sand like waves. One was heading directly for my feet. Get back, I shouted. I didn't hesitate. I threw a heavy kick, slamming my foot into Luo Yu's chest to launch her away from the danger zone. At the same time, I used the recoil to propel myself backward. Luo Yu's face turned bright red with rage as she tumbled through the air. She probably thought I was attacking her out of spite. Then the ground erupted. A massive, cage-like shadow burst from the sand where we had just been standing. It was a giant mouth, dozens of feet wide. One of Xiao Yan's followers couldn't react in time. The beast snapped its jaws shut, swallowing him whole. More of them emerged. A dozen massive creatures lunged out of the desert, their roars shaking the air. Several other cultivators were caught off guard and dragged screaming into the depths. The crowd panicked. Everyone scrambled into the air, trying to escape the ambush. One of the creatures shook its body and transformed. It took on a half-human, half-snake form, glaring at us with freezing eyes. It called us wretched invaders and ordered us to die. The leader blew a horn, and the sound echoed across the dunes. In an instant, the horizon changed. Hundreds of these earth-abyssal, heaven-swallowing pythons were charging toward us. They were all powerful, mostly at the late stages of the void immortal realm. They spat out massive clouds of sand and wind, creating a localized storm that trapped us. Run, someone screamed. The cultivators who could move fast enough bolted. Xiao Yin fled under the protection of his family guards, his eyes frantically searching the chaos for me. He couldn't find a trace of my presence. He didn't realize that I had already activated my clone's invisibility. Under the cover of the dust storm, I had vanished. I reappeared over 1,000 miles away. I stood on a lonely sand dune, feeling impressed by my clone's abilities. The invisibility wasn't just for sight, it completely erased my aura. It was the perfect tool for avoiding unnecessary trouble. I didn't waste time. I summoned my 1,000 clones again and organized them into 32 teams. I sent them out in every direction to map the realm. Each team was equipped with bronze masks and practiced a combined sword array. They were my vanguard. If they found small treasures, they took them. If they found a major horde, they called for the rest of the army. I walked calmly through the desert, watching my map fill up. I didn't need to rush. My clones were doing the hard work for me. Eventually, I crossed paths with a small group of the Python tribe. I didn't even break a sweat. I summoned 100 clones and crushed them instantly. I didn't kill them immediately, though. I grabbed them and performed a soul search. Within minutes, I had the layout of the land. This place was called the Shafong Great Desert. It was ruled by two dominant races, the Earth Abyssal Pythons and the Wind Rocks. They fought over rare resources like Earth Abyssal Jade and Gale Stones. I tossed the bodies aside and let my clones clean up the battlefield. In less than 5 minutes, there was no evidence that a fight had even happened. The wind blew, the sand shifted, and I moved on. The trial was just beginning, and I already held all the cards. I realized why these secret realms were so dangerous. If every disciple who entered could easily strip the place bare, the treasures would have vanished generations ago. The realm had to protect itself, but some information was still available to those who knew where to look. Through the memories I stole, I learned about Earth Abyssal Jade and Gale Stones. These weren't just common rocks. They were law-level treasures, packed with pure earth and wind essence. They were as valuable as the jellyfish Dharma Sutra I'd found before. This realm was a gold mine. But there was something even better than the stones. I saw her in the memories of the pythons I'd just killed, the Earth Abyssal Queen. She was the only one with the pure heaven-swallowing python bloodline. In the vision, she sat on a massive stone throne in a grand city. She was stunning, half woman, half snake, wearing a crown and hollowed-out golden armor. She looked like a goddess of war. I wanted her essence blood. I wanted it badly. I looked at the blood I'd already collected from the regular pythons. The system rated it as high grade, just a step below premium. It wasn't perfect, but it would do for now. I summoned 5 clones and transformed them into the exact likenesses of the pythons I'd just slaughtered. I injected the stolen memories directly into their minds. I took control of the leader, a python named Delai. I tested the body, shifting from a massive armored serpent to a naga form with a human torso, and finally into a full human. The transformation was seamless. These pythons were incredible. They didn't just control Earth. They used wind to glide through the sand like sharks in the ocean. Delai had been a level 9 void immortal. My clone was only at level 7, but that didn't matter. I could hide my true power level easily. "Greetings, Master," the clone said, speaking the hissing, guttural language of the python tribe perfectly. Reports started flooding in from my other vanguards. They were finding jade, stones, and rare herbs everywhere. More importantly, one team found the location of the royal city. But then, a message came through that made me grin. "Master, we found Xiao Yin and her group." My eyes lit up. It was time for a little fun. I ordered my other clones to keep searching for treasures while I handled this personally. I kept my original clone, Shui Yun, as a prisoner and led my new python squad back to Delai's tribe. The tribe lived in a small town built of stone and red clay. About 700 pythons lived there. When I marched in with my prisoner and my squad, the villagers cheered. "The chief is back," they shouted. He caught one of the outsiders. I laughed, mimicking Delai's boisterous, arrogant personality. I shouted in their rough tongue, telling them there were more outsiders nearby. I waved my hand, gathering 100 of the strongest warriors in the village. We headed back out into the dunes, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Meanwhile, Xiao Yin and her group were struggling. They looked exhausted, their robes torn and stained with blood. They had just survived a fight with the wind rocks and managed to find a few gale stones. They thought they were being careful. They thought they were safe. They had no idea one of my invisible clones had been standing 10 feet away from them the entire time. "Careful," one of Xiao Yan's protectors screamed. He was a level 9 void immortal, and he finally sensed the vibration in the sand. He grabbed Xiao Yan and leaped into the air just as the ground exploded. 12 pythons lunged from the sand, teeth bared. Before the cultivators could react, my army of 100 warriors swarmed from the dunes, surrounding them completely. The air turned into a whirlwind of lethal sand and killing intent. I watched from a distance, leaning against a rock. It was almost sad. They hadn't even lasted a full day. "Kill them," my clone, acting as the captain, roared. The pythons attacked with brutal efficiency. Their massive tails slammed into the cultivators' magical shields like battering rams. One of the protectors coughed up blood as his defense shattered under the weight of a giant serpent strike. But these were kids from a golden immortal family. They were loaded with gear. As soon as one shield broke, another protector pulled out a high-level artifact to hold the line. Then, I saw Xiaoyan reach into her robes. Her face was pale with terror, but her hands were steady as she pulled out a talisman that glowed with a blinding, golden light. It was a fire talisman, and the energy coming off it was terrifying. That was a true fire talisman. I felt the heat before the light even hit my eyes. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't hesitate. I sent a mental command to DeLong and the rest of my Python tribesmen immediately. "Retreat. Now," I roared through our mental link. "They have a killing trump card." The Earth Origin Pythons didn't question me. They trusted their leader blindly. They turned and lunged back into the dunes just as the world turned red. A flash of golden red light erupted, looking like a tidal wave of boiling magma. It swept through the area where the pythons had been clustered a second ago. The sound was sickening, a sharp, sizzling hiss. Over 20 massive pythons were swallowed by the flames. They screamed, their scales flickering with earth magic as they tried to resist, but the fire burned straight to the bone. This wasn't normal fire. It contained the laws of a true immortal. My void immortal-level pythons didn't stand a chance. In an instant, they were nothing but gray ash blowing in the desert wind. The sight stunned DeLong and Erlong. Their bloodlust evaporated, replaced by cold, hard terror. "Come on then," Xiaoyan screamed. Her confidence was back, and she let out a jagged, arrogant laugh. "You mud pigs really thought you could kill me?" She pulled out 2 more true fire talismans and flourished a crimson immortal sword. The blade glowed with a fierce, radiant light. It didn't even look like a sword anymore. It looked like a literal streak of living flame. I stared at her from my position as the tribe leader. This girl was a walking treasury. I hated how she flaunted her wealth, but I already decided that sword belonged to me. Xiaoyan raised her talismans again, threatening to blow us all to hell. My tribesmen flinched, backing away in fear. They were beasts, but they weren't stupid. They knew death when they saw it. "Run, go," Xiaoyan shouted to her guards. They didn't wait. The Xiao family survivors ignited their escape lights and bolted toward the horizon. Those talismans were precious. Her ancestor had probably only given her 3, and she'd already used one on the very first day. She was terrified, even if she was acting tough. DeLong and Erlong wanted to give chase, but I held them back. "Forget it," I said, my voice deep and commanding. "They have powerful weapons. Charging in now would just be a waste of lives." I paused, a smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. "But we don't have to be the ones to kill them. Spread the word to the other tribes and the Wind Rocks. Tell them these outsiders are carrying mountains of immortal pills and treasures. Let the others wear them down. When they're exhausted, we'll move in and finish them." DeLong and Erlong looked at me with newfound respect. They probably wondered why their hot-headed leader was suddenly a tactical genius, but they didn't ask. They just went to work. I led the rest of my squad back to the Li-Tu tribe camp. My Blood Cloud clone was still being guarded by my other Python clones, perfectly safe. As soon as I stepped into my tent, a beautiful woman with a human torso and a long, shimmering snake tail wrapped herself around me. In the Earth Origin Python tribe, fashion was minimal. The men showed off their muscles, and the women wore barely enough silk to cover the essentials. As the leader, my wife, was a top-tier beauty. I was actually surprised. Her skin was fair and delicate, nothing like the rugged, coarse look of the males. Their aesthetic was surprisingly close to human standards. 10 days passed in a blur. Life was good. I spent my time well. First, I used the tribe's influence to hoard a massive amount of Earth Origin jade and gale stones. I was getting rich. Second, I kept the pressure on Xiaoyan. No matter where her group ran, a local tribe was waiting to ambush them. I made sure they never had a moment of peace. By the 10th day, she only had 2 guards left, both of them heavily injured. They were trapped in the desert, shivering in fear, unable to find an exit. I didn't kill her yet because she still had that last talisman. I wanted her to suffer a few more days of pure terror first. Third, the entire secret realm was falling into chaos. My army of 1,000 clones had pushed far beyond the desert. They were looting everything. Rare herbs, forging materials, even high-level bloodlines. I took it all. If my clones ran into other cultivators finding treasure, they didn't negotiate. A group of my clones, all wearing identical green bronze masks, would simply swarm them like a tide. A legend started spreading among the trial disciples. They whispered about a mysterious group of masked men. They were cold, fearless, and moved like ghosts. They didn't care if you were a local or a disciple. If you had something they wanted, they took it. If you resisted, they cut you down. It was that simple. But I hit a snag. I sent a few clones into the Earth Origin City to scout, and the news wasn't great. The Queen of the Pythons was at the absolute peak of the Void Immortal realm. The only reason she wasn't a true immortal was because the realm's laws were broken. She was a monster. Her personal guard consisted of 100 level 9 Void Immortals. The Windrock King was just as strong. Taking them head-on was suicide. So, I changed my strategy. I started a double-sided guerrilla war. I sent 100 clones disguised as Windrocks to slaughter Python patrols. Then, I sent 100 clones disguised as Pythons to ambush Windrock nests. After a few days of this, the two ancient enemies were at each other's throats, eyes red with rage. I just sat back in my tent, enjoying the service of my wife, waiting for the two kings to tear each other apart so I could sweep up the remains. Back in Moon City, my main body was relaxing in a lounge chair. Jianwu and Jianro were tending to me, their touch soft and elegant. Life was perfect. Suddenly, I opened my eyes. A surge of power rippled through my veins. My clones had been busy. When they weren't fighting, I had them all cultivating simultaneously. It was the ultimate efficiency. I felt the breakthrough hit. I reached into my inner sea, looking at the 36 immortal apertures in my palace. I had officially hit the peak of the 7th level. I was moving toward level 8, and I wasn't stopping. 12 of my 36 immortal apertures were already wide open, glowing with a mysterious, divine light. I was at the 7th level of the Void Immortal realm, but I wanted more. I wanted to break through. Inside my system space, 8,000 clones sat in meditation. On my command, they all began to attack the bottleneck of the 8th level simultaneously. With the power of 4,000 clones stacking together, the energy inside my body surged like a violent flood. It was a relentless, crushing force. The barrier protecting the 8th level started to buckle. My immortal energy slammed into it again and again, each strike more ferocious than the last. Then, I heard a sharp crack. The bottleneck shattered. The path was open. A wave of relief and power washed over me. I felt every pore in my body breathe. I reached out, grabbed a pile of immortal essence stones, and drained them dry in seconds. They turned to ash, their energy fueling my new foundation. I stood up, feeling the strength vibrating in my bones. I was officially a level 8 Void Immortal. My power hadn't just increased, it had more than doubled. Given my foundation, I knew I could now stand toe-to-toe with a level 9 Void Immortal without breaking a sweat. My system had upgraded too. My clone storage space was larger, and their invisibility was now nearly perfect. Ordinary level 9 experts wouldn't even know they were there. Below the true immortal stage, I was essentially untouchable. Congratulations, Master, Jianwu and Jianro whispered in unison. They were genuinely happy for me. I gave them a small smile. Keep it quiet. We stay low-key. I lay back down on my chair, letting my aura fade into nothingness. I was powerful, sure, but I wasn't stupid. The world was full of hidden monsters. Until I was truly invincible, I wasn't going to go out and draw unnecessary attention to my main body. That would be irresponsible to myself and all my hardworking clones. Meanwhile, in the southern part of the Great Desert, things were looking grim for my enemies. Xiao Yin and his two bodyguards were huddled in a sandpit, looking like beaten dogs. They were covered in wounds and exhausted from days of being hunted. They had just fought off a group of windrocks and were terrified to even look at the sky. Why? Xiao Yin hissed, his eyes cold and bloodshot. Everywhere we go, it's either pythons or wind rocks. It's like they have eyes on us. A small insect crawled out of the sand nearby, and all three of them jumped, ready to bolt. When they realized it was just a bug, they slumped back, drained. But their relief didn't last. They looked up and saw 50 wind rocks circling above them. Every single one of them was at the 8th level of the void immortal realm. Xiaoyan's face turned pale. He looked like he was about to cry. He couldn't understand why these creatures were so obsessed with him. The wind rocks didn't wait. They dived, their wings creating massive blades of green wind that sliced through the air. These weren't actual monsters, of course. They were my clones, specifically redirected to finish this. Die? Just die already. Xiaoyan screamed. He was cornered. He pulled out a true fire talisman and threw it with everything he had. A wall of white-hot flames erupted, sweeping toward my clones. The lead clone didn't flinch. He signaled the others to retreat, then stood his ground, letting the fire consume him. He sacrificed himself just to ensure the talisman's energy was spent. From the void, another one of my hidden clones watched the scene play out. The cultivation world was a brutal place. I remembered my 500 years as a slave in the mines. If I hadn't gained this system, I'd probably be dead or still breaking rocks under a guard's whip. Xiaoyan was only suffering because he picked a fight with someone he shouldn't have. The fight was over in less than a minute. Xiaoyan and his men stood no chance against a coordinated army of level 8 clones. When the dust settled, my clones vanished, leaving behind nothing but scorched sand and Xiaoyan's gear. I reached into the system space and pulled out a glowing red blade. It was the blazing sword, a high-quality fire element immortal treasure. I swung it a few times, but it felt clunky. My main body focused on gun gold energy, which didn't mix well with fire. I decided to test something else. I shifted my consciousness into a clone that specialized in fire cultivation. The moment I gripped the hilt, the sword sang. I swung it downward, and a massive dragon of red flame tore through the desert, leaving a mile-long trench of molten glass in its wake. Now that's a weapon, I muttered. I tossed the sword back into my system storage. I had checked it thoroughly for tracking marks and found nothing. Even if there was a hidden seal, once it entered the system space, it was mine. I was confident that no one could detect my presence. If they could, my tens of thousands of clones would have been exposed long ago. Outside the canyon, the moment Zhao Yin died, immortal Yin Yun felt it. Her face turned pale with disbelief. It shouldn't have been possible. Zhao Yin had 3 true fire talismans, a low-grade immortal treasure, and 9 guards at the 9th level of the void immortal realm. Unless he was relentlessly besieged by a massive army, he was supposed to be untouchable. Yet, he was dead. It had only been 11 days since the trial started. Yin Yun stared at the void, her expression dark. The entrance to the secret realm had already closed and wouldn't reopen for a month. Even as a golden immortal, she couldn't see what was happening inside. Trash. A bunch of useless trash, she hissed. Inside the secret realm, the desert winds grew violent. My plan was working. Through constant provocation by my clones, the 2 dominant races of the desert were finally losing their minds. Inside the palace of the Earth Serpent King, the tribal leaders were furious. They shouted about the Windrock clan's recent killings. They claimed their kin were being hunted and were afraid to leave their homes. They were convinced a war was coming. Queen Di Yuan sat high on her throne, clad in golden armor that hugged her heroic figure. Her beautiful eyes were filled with cold rage. She didn't hesitate. She ordered the weak to hide underground and summoned every warrior to march on Windrock Cliff. On the other side, the Windrock clan was reacting the exact same way. They were actually excited. Centuries of friction and resource scarcity had turned these 2 races into blood enemies. They just needed a spark. I was that spark. I didn't feel guilty. Many of the recent killings weren't even done by my clones. The Windrocks had been hunting the serpents on their own. I just sped up the timeline. I didn't want it to come to this. I sighed internally when I received the Queen's summons. Then, I put on a mask of fanatical rage. Kill them. Kill those birdmen bastards. My clone, posing as a tribal leader named Delai, roared at his people. The earth serpents of the Lutu tribe roared back, their fighting spirits soaring. I had even tucked 100 of my other clones into this specific tribe to lead the cheering. The Queen's messenger, A beautiful and sturdy warrior named Yuanzi was deeply moved. She had visited 3 other tribes, but none showed the fire that D Lai's tribe possessed. She looked at me with genuine respect. "Leader D Lai, you are a true warrior of our race. I am proud of you," she said, bowing deeply. Behind me, the tribal woman Tu Yaoran beamed with pride. Her man was different lately, bolder, stronger. I didn't waste time. I gathered 200 warriors and followed the messenger immediately. As the 2 armies mobilized, the desert became a powder keg. Small tribes hid in the sand. Visiting cultivators who were here for treasure found themselves caught in the crossfire, fleeing for their lives. Meanwhile, my main body was back in Silver Moon City, living the high life in a luxury villa. I sat in a pavilion, playing the zither while incense smoke curled around me. I looked like an elegant young master in white. 2 beautiful maids played accompanying instruments, and a group of enchanting succubus demons danced before me. I had so much time on my hands that I'd picked up several hobbies. My zither skills weren't bad. I watched the demons dance. Their movements were supposed to be graceful, but the way they moved made my blood pressure rise. If I didn't have a heart of stone, I would have lost my composure long ago. Suddenly, a sharp, excited cry echoed in my mind from one of my clones. "Master, I found it. A massive opportunity. I need backup, fast." I frowned. "What's the rush? Haven't I taught you better than this?" I calmly shifted a sliver of my consciousness into that clone. The moment my vision cleared, I froze. "Holy crap," I muttered. "That is huge." I was deep inside a hidden Great Rift Valley within the jungle area of the secret realm. Ahead of me stood a tree 100 feet tall, glowing with a brilliant golden light. Hundreds of golden fruits hung from its branches. I searched my memories of immortal treasures. The name hit me instantly: gold marrow fruit. These were low-grade treasures. You could refine them into pills or eat them raw to boost your talent and comprehension of gold element laws. The tree itself was a gold mine. The leaves could be made into spirit tea, and the wood was perfect for crafting law-based immortal weapons. My main body possessed a gung-gold physique. This wasn't just a treasure, it was the perfect fuel for my growth. I finally understood why my clone was screaming. "I'm taking the fruits," I decided. "Actually, forget that. I'm ripping the whole tree out by the roots." My clone stayed hidden in the shadows. In front of the tree, a chaotic battle was already raging. Hundreds of void immortal disciples were desperately fighting off a swarm of golden insects. The bugs were the size of a palm and looked like they were cast from solid gold. They were fast, their teeth were razor-sharp, and they were tearing through the cultivators like paper. I watched from the shadows as the scene turned into a bloodbath. Several disciples screamed in agony as the golden insects tore through their protective barriers. The bugs didn't just bite, they burrowed directly into their bodies. I felt a chill as I sensed the disciples' cultivation levels plummeting instantly. It was like the insects were drinking their very essence. Hundreds of cultivators, most of them at the 8th or 9th level of the void immortal realm, were being held back by this swarm. They couldn't get anywhere near the gold marrow fruits. The bugs were incredibly fast, and their spiritual attacks were lethal, but I noticed a weakness. Their physical defense was mediocre. They were dying off quickly under the relentless barrage of spells. I estimated the swarm wouldn't last much longer. The people here were the elites of their respective sects, and greed is a powerful motivator. I saw the fanaticism in their eyes. They didn't care about sustainable harvesting for future generations. Once they broke the line, they would strip that tree bare until not even a leaf was left. "Don't hold back," someone roared. "Kill these bugs now, or more people will show up to steal our share." The air exploded with light as the disciples ramped up their power. I knew what they were thinking. They were all holding something back for the inevitable fight against each other once the bugs were dead. This secret realm had been a slaughterhouse for the past 10 days, and this valley was about to become the biggest grave yet. The golden insects sensed the rising killing intent. Their bodies glowed with a blinding, jagged light, and they let out a high-pitched screech that made my head spin. The battlefield turned into a blur of gore and golden husks. "What are these things?" I muttered, impressed. I specialized in swarm tactics with my clones, but if someone could raise a hive of these bugs, they could actually give my army a run for its money. Suddenly, a notification pinged in my mind. "These are gold testing insects. The system's voice rang out. They grow exclusively by consuming gold marrow fruits or similar low-grade metal elements. Most people can't afford to raise them, and those who can usually don't bother. I blinked. You make a lot of sense, but could you stop jumping into my head without warning? You're going to give me a heart attack. The system usually ignored me, so its sudden input was surprising. Maybe my thoughts about the bugs had offended its sense of superiority. I pushed the thought aside and looked back at the chaos. You guys keep fighting, I whispered, a smirk tugging at my lips. I'll just take the prize. With a single thought, I deployed 100 clones. I didn't send them into the fight. I blinked them directly past the front lines, right onto the branches of the gold marrow tree. They moved like ghosts. While the cultivators were busy dying, my clones were busy picking. 400 or 500 fruits disappeared into their storage rings in the blink of an eye. The tree, which had been glowing like a second sun, suddenly dimmed as its treasure vanished. Look, the fruits are gone, someone screamed. The battlefield froze. Even the vicious insects stopped their suicide charges to look at their food source. But before they could process the theft, something even more insane happened. The 100-foot-tall tree began to shake. The ground groaned, and the entire Great Rift Valley started to tremble as the tree was slowly pried upward. On a nearby cliff, hidden within the crags of an old tree, a shadowy figure stiffened. It was so perfectly camouflaged that it looked like part of the wood, but it couldn't hide its shock when the gold marrow tree started moving. I was just as shocked. My 100 clones were pulling with everything they had, but the tree was barely budging. These clones were all at the 8th level of the Void Immortal Realm. Together, they could have uprooted a mountain, yet this tree was anchored deep. Damn it, I cursed under my breath. I should have sent 5,000 clones. No, 8,000. I could have covered every inch of this trunk and ripped it out in one go. I had been too cocky, and I'd missed my window. The disciples and the insects were snapping out of their days. Someone's stealing the tree, a disciple shrieked, his voice cracking with rage. They took the fruits, and now they want the whole damn thing. They were seeing red. They had bled and died for this, and now some ghost was snatching it from under their noses. A burst of immortal light streaked toward the base of the tree, aimed at my clones. I frowned. I wanted that tree alive. I couldn't let them blow it up. My 100 clones abandoned the harvest and formed a wall in front of the trunk. They struck back simultaneously. The collision of powers caused a massive explosion, sending a shockwave through the valley that made the weaker cultivators cough up blood. Because they had attacked, my clones' concealment broke. The valley went silent. The disciples stared, their expressions shifting from rage to pure confusion. Standing before them were 100 identical men, all wearing cold, mysterious bronze masks. "It's them," a man screamed, his voice full of trauma. "The bronze mask freaks." I glanced at the guy who shouted. I vaguely remembered him. A few days ago, I'd pinned him to the ground and drained quite a bit of his blood for a ritual. He looked like he was having a breakdown.